Part 30. Taking stock of the top 10 golden fingers, the protagonist of Wanjie went crazy. Author, Chirp. Chapter 291. The people from Blue and White Club are here. At this time, countless people in the world were looking at the two members of the Blue and White Club in the picture, looking at them carefully one by one, and then making comments. These two people don't look like they have much head and 6 arms, do they? Moreover, I couldn't feel any special power fluctuations in these two people. Aren't they just two mortals? Nonsense, this must be immortal. You see, Li Jing is immortal, but can you catch his sword? Oh, don't talk about it, let alone a sword. As long as he cuts off the sword, there is no sword that I can't catch. Tisk, you guys are the real talents. By the way, do these two people also have some kind of conceptual ability? Why do I feel that this world is full of such conceptual abilities? That wood carving can give you the ability to breathe underwater? Obviously, things like wood carvings should not be a special case in this world. Containment object? They call this stuff a containment object. Isn't this a sealed item? Tisk, are you from the mysterious continent? What about sealed items? At this time, countless people were discussing, looking at Luoyi and Wei Lan in the picture, and making comments. These two people indeed look ordinary. As for whether they have conceptual abilities like Mo Qian, I don't know. At this time, it was seen that in the picture. As Mo Qian got the tablet, he also began to read the so-called authorization letter on the tablet. But there were too many, more than 400 pages. Mo Qian also just read 2 pages and then gave it back to Na Luoyi. He already knew what kind of national agency this should be. But he didn't expect it to be authorized by the United Nations. What's the meaning? Mo Qian asked, pretending to be a little surprised. However, he was actually a little surprised. Although he learned some information from Che Yun's 667, Che Yun was also a peripheral member and didn't know much. Now, when I look at the authorization letter, I understand. Good guy, this Blue and White Society is actually a sovereign entity recognized by the United Nations. What does this mean? A sovereign entity means that it has its own rights and is recognized by many countries. It is quite so, this Blue and White Society is like a sovereign country hidden in the eyes of the public. Soon, Luoyi explained that the Blue and White Society is not a country, but the Blue and White Society has the international status of a sovereign country. Tisk. Mo Qian believed it. But he still didn't believe it on the surface. Faced with doubts, Luoyi and Wei Lan looked at each other, smiled, and then, the two suddenly jumped up, and then, as if they stepped on something in mid-air just like that, they took advantage of the volley again and jumped directly to a height of more than 1 meter. The two of them jumped repeatedly in the air, as if there was some kind of staircase. Soaring in the air, what the hell? Damn it! Moon step. Mo Qian looked at the two people with a confused face as they stepped on the air and leaped into the air. Everyone was dumbfounded. At this time, Wei Lan casually stuffed a candy into his mouth and explained, this is not a moon step. It's just an abnormal effect with a controllable cost. Regarding abnormal effects, you have them too. Haven't you discovered your abnormality yet? No need to hide it, we know your abilities better than you. Mo Qian was silent. Luoyi said, there are always things in this world that shouldn't exist, forget it, you just need to know that all abnormalities must be controlled, everything that is supernatural, shocks the soul, and breaks common sense, must be contained. No one knows that one day, something seemingly ordinary can destroy the world. You gave away a wooden sculpture on the world, and that wooden sculpture is an anomalous item, Wei Lan said. Wood carving, Mo Qian was taken aback. Luoyi smiled, it seems you still don't know the origin of your ability. Your ability is derived from that wooden sculpture. We call it the deep diver effect. In addition to not drowning and adapting to water pressure, it also has a difficult side effect: nightmare. Nightmare. Mo Kyan frowned. Soon he finally understood why these two people wanted to test him instead of directly contacting him. The reason for co-authoring was because he was not bothered by nightmares at all, seemed to be full of energy, and did not want to be. It's the same as being infected with the deep diver effect. However, Mo Kyan also told the truth. He did have a nightmare, but it disappeared after that. As soon as he said this, Luo Yi frowned, and for a moment, he felt a little strange. According to Mo Kyan, he has had nightmares, which is in line with the characteristics of the deep diver effect. However, the nightmares stopped after a period of time. What does this mean? Well, whether it's an immunity problem or not, you have to come with us to the research department in the Pacific, Luo Yi said. At the same time, he handed Mo Kyan an agreement. The agreement is called the S13 agreement. When he signs it, he will become a restrictor. The so-called restrictor means a restricted life who will live in the base. The district cooperates with the research, and they will try their best to meet all the necessities of life until the conditions are met and the restrictions are lifted. Like Mo Kyan, ordinary people who are accidentally affected or infected by some kind of containment object will become restrictors. This kind of people cannot be dealt with in extreme ways, nor can they be left alone. Those who are extremely dangerous may even be forcibly housed as contained objects. Those who are low risk, or those who are unknown, will live in restricted living areas and be controlled by the Blue and White Society. Supervision. If the abnormal effects are successfully stripped away, then the restrictor will have his memory cleared and return to society, or he will retain his memory and become a peripheral member. Under special circumstances, the restrictor can even participate in the assessment and enter the selection ranks of official members. I see. Mo Kyan suddenly understood, but then, he looked at the two people in front of him and suddenly said, "What if I refuse?" At this moment, Luo Yi and Wei Lan looked at each other. Luo Yi exhaled and slowly taking off his glasses. Mo Kyan took a look and his heart froze. He slowly put his left hand behind his back and started shooting the air, letting the air rotate in his palm. If he shot it out, it would be an air cannon with great power. However, at this moment, Luo Yi smiled and said, "If you refuse to cooperate, in order to prevent you from abusing your abilities, we will secretly increase our efforts to monitor you." Wei Lan also nodded and said with a smile, "It's very powerful." Mo Kyan? That's it? He was a little stunned. He thought these people were going to take him away by force, or use some other means to force him to submit. But in the end, this is it? If not. Luo Yi smiled and said, "Our Blue and White Society is not like any other organization. There is no need to force it, voluntariness is the most important." I see. Mo Kyan smiled and released the air from his palm. He read the agreement carefully, and it was indeed different from what he expected. But then, he was a little curious about the fact that his nightmare was lifted. Did he torture it 9 times and then it disappeared, but others seemed to be there all the time? This made him curious. Is it because his absolute hit was cracked? Or what? He thought. After thinking for a while, he asked, "By the way, does your research department specialize in studying supernatural things? A specialized research method? Develop a scientific principle that prevents drowning? And then develop the ability to get humans off oxygen?" As soon as these words came out, Luo Yi and Wei Lan both laughed. "You seem to have some misunderstanding about the contained objects. Do you think this thing is like some magic weapon that can bring magical power to people?" Luo Yi asked with a smile. "Isn't it?" Mo Kyan was stunned. Luo Yi smiled and explained, "Indeed, some contained objects are indeed like this, and some characteristics are allowed to be used by others. This is its characteristic." You have too little contact and don't know the horror of contained objects. They will always have some absolute characteristics that are enough to subvert the laws of the universe. Do you think the reason why you won't drown is because some unknown energy is supplying you with oxygen? No. It's the human body's need for oxygen, which is turned off. Class D personnel who have been suffocated in water for 15 hours have no changes in their genes or cell structure. They still need oxygen. However, when they are in water, their cells forget that they need oxygen for transformation. Energy, forcing normal work, will also not cause any damage to cells. If the contained object is really like the magic weapon in the novel, then we will really celebrate. Because, we can finally completely solve the containment objects, and also make the branches of science more abundant and human civilization more prosperous. As soon as these words came out, Mo-Kyan fell silent. And all the heavens and worlds are also a little surprised. Good guy, is it okay to forcefully forget that you need oxygen? Characteristic. Containment object. Absolute characteristics. Subverting the laws of the universe. Worry, subverting the laws of the universe, isn't this a conceptual ability? The river god is like this, and so is Li Jing. And Mo-Kyan, his absolute hit is also like this. Gee, this contained object is a bit outrageous. By the way, what does Luoyi mean? What does it mean to celebrate each other just because it is a magic weapon? Why, you look down on our magic weapon. Suddenly, I have a feeling that this contained object is something that can subvert common sense. Doesn't Mo-Kyan's ability subvert common sense issues? Tisk tisk, there's something there. I'm becoming more and more interested in this contained object. Indeed, I am also interested. I always feel that the description of this contained object is very similar to the sealed object in the previous secret world. It does look a bit similar, but I don't know exactly what the containment objects in this world look like. By the way, the ability of Luoyi and Wei Lan to jump back and forth in the air can be regarded as an abnormal effect, right? Gee, even though they are only mortals, these abnormal effects feel a bit like supernatural powers. It's different. It feels like these two people don't seem to be consuming. Magical powers still need to consume mana, but these two people have no mana fluctuations in their bodies at all. What are they consuming? Completely good. It feels weird and a bit confusing. At this time, countless people are discussing, zero. To be honest, they really don't have any systematic concept of the blue and white society. At the same time, they don't have any systematic concept of the contained objects. Although it has appeared before in the mysterious world, we also know that there is some kind of sealed object. But the sealed object is a sealed object after all, and it is definitely not the same thing as the contained object. The sealed object can still be broken, and it can also be re-evolved by the extraordinary and immortal characteristics of the extraordinary. A new sealed object has come out. But the contained object in the blue and white world, who knows what that thing is? At this moment, it can be seen that in the picture, Mo-Kyan is thoughtful. He is deeply interested in subverting the laws of the universe. Realized. His absolute hit was like this. At that time, he was all confused. So, he felt the same as what Luoyi said. At this time, he heard Luoyi continue: the biggest difference between magic weapons and contained objects is, the magic weapon has a principle and can be analyzed. We also need to follow the natural law of life and death. Since it is a natural law, if the materials allow, we can even create another one. Even if some magic weapons are very powerful, they are also limited. It also requires energy to operate. Even if a magic weapon contains terrifying power that can destroy the world, we don't have to be afraid, because we know that as long as we find out the reason, we can use technology to guide the energy out and turn it into our own use. It can be turned into a battery or energy source to benefit mankind. As for the contents. Speaking of this, Luoyi paused, and then said, I won't talk about anything else, but what's the principle of the wood carving you came into contact with? If you touch it, you will have nightmares when you sleep. Then, you are underwater, no need to breathe. Curse, Amokayan suddenly interrupted. Luoyi. He curled his lips secretly, and then said it would be nice if it was a curse. No matter how weird the curse is, there are objective conditions. Whether it is an energy link or something else, at least it is regular and can be solved. After all, can cast a curse and the curse will be lifted. However, this wood carving is different. There is no curse, no radiation, and no changes in cells or genes. All people infected with the deep diver's effect are normal, whether at the genetic level or at the macro level. People. Moreover, the wood carving itself is made of ordinary wood. It's still a piece of rotten wood that's severely corroded. With Luoyi's words, Amokayan was stunned. He was a little dumbfounded. So how to study this, he asked. Luoyi said although the contained objects are unscientific, most of them can find out the rules and characteristics. According to their characteristics, reasonable arrangement of containment measures can greatly reduce the harm. Alpha 531, well, that wooden sculpture is already one of the mildest 0.5 containment objects. You can't even imagine the truly terrifying containment objects. The purpose of our research is to make it as harmless as possible, affect humans as little as possible, and prevent it from shaking the foundation of nature. Only after ensuring these and ensuring that they are controllable can we use their effects to create value that is useful to mankind. Listening to Luoyi's words, Amokayan nodded. He understood. But then, he felt something in his heart and asked, you seem to have done experiments. What is that D-class personnel? Wei Lan said D-class personnel are the choices made by death row prisoners before execution, either accept the death penalty or become a D-class personnel. D-class personnel are the test personnel used to test dangerous contained objects. The mortality rate of D-class personnel is extremely high. They may experience terrorist incidents and may also go to some unknown and dangerous places. Some places must be carried out by humans. It is impossible to sacrifice the lives of members in vain. Therefore, D-class personnel are needed. The expendables go to thunder. To put it bluntly, they can live for a while, but sooner or later they will die. Even if some D-class personnel are still alive, they are already dead in society. Some people who have worked for a month, even if they are still alive, do not want to work anymore. If they want to accept death, they return to their country to accept the death penalty. But some people think that it is better to die than to live, so keep on persisting. This kind of person can be regarded as making a contribution to mankind. If they choose to become D-class personnel for 4 consecutive months and are still alive, we will also award them the Medal of Will of D and try our best to arrange for them to participate in experiments with a higher survival rate. They are unwilling to give up their lives and have made contributions to mankind. We will also respect them to a certain extent. As for such people, so far, there is only one person who has received the Medal of Will of D and is still alive and continues to persevere. Taking stock of the top 10 golden fingers, the protagonist of Wanjie went crazy. Author, Chirp. Chapter 292. At this time, following Wei Ian's narration, countless people in the world had a certain understanding of the containment objects, even D-class personnel, and the Blue and White Society. At this moment, everyone started discussing. Oh, and D-class personnel? A death row inmate who specializes in testing contained objects. By the way, doesn't this make those death row prisoners easier? Cheap those death row prisoners. How do you say this? Isn't this a disguised form of giving those death row prisoners superpowers? Gee, it's really a bit of a waste. Yes, I feel a bit wasted too. Alas, I also want to try what it is like to have this kind of conceptual ability. Although underwater breathing is useless to me, it is still a conceptual ability after all. What you said makes me want to be a D-class personnel. Tisk, I'm afraid you don't know what's dangerous in this, right? You actually want to be a D-class personnel. Dangerous? How dangerous could this be? If having nightmares about the suffocation and oppression like that wooden sculpture is dangerous, then for me, it is not dangerous. I don't need to sleep for a long time. Indeed, only mortals find them dangerous, but poor people find these sheltered objects quite interesting. I don't know if there are any other contained objects. There must be other containment objects. Also, the wood carving deep diver effect is said to be the mildest type of containment object. This is considered the mildest. There must be other dangers. Laughing to death, no matter how dangerous it is, it doesn't matter to Pandeo. Even if the body dies, Pandeo still has a soul that can be immortal. Just reshape the body. At this level, Pandeo doesn't take it lightly. So, this D-class personnel, well, Pandeo also wants to give it a try. At this time, countless people were thinking and discussing. Although what Wei Lan said was very serious, countless people in the world did not take it to heart at all. For them, even physical death is not considered true death. So, many people are not afraid of any contained objects at all. They even think that the contained objects are very interesting. This is obviously because they do not understand the contained objects. They think it is just a price of nightmares. However, this is also it's normal. After all, many people don't know what the price of the contained objects is. Even if they know that the contained objects ignore the laws of the universe, ignore the laws of physics, etc., 21 is a bug, etc. They still don't understand it personally. Cognition of experience. Therefore, it is normal to have such remarks. At this time, in the picture, along with Wei Ian's introduction, Mo Kyung also roughly understood something. As for the concept of D-class personnel, although it is not very clear. At the same time, he is also willing to become a Lemeter and follow Wei Lan Luoyi and the others. But he has one more request. He has to help his dad heal his leg. So, it will take some time. Wei Lan and Luoyi also agreed. Then, in the next period of time, Mo Kyung realized the almighty power of these two blue and white club members. Both Wei Lan and Luoyi seem to know the techniques of farming very well, just like these two are old farmers who have been farming for their entire lives. Moreover, not only farming, Wei Lan is also very proficient in medicine. In the end, it was even Wei Lan who was helping treat his leg. Mo Kyung was surprised. That's all for medicine, but this kind of farming is very strange. Blue and White Club still needs to train this? Mo Kyung couldn't figure it out, but he probably knew that even if the members of the Blue and White Society farmed, they would definitely be growing something unusual. The surgery went well. After that, Mo Kyung finally said goodbye to his father and planned to go to the base of the Blue and White Society and become that kind of Lemeter. Soon, Wei Lan and Luoyi flew overnight and took Mo Kyung to a place in the Pacific called Meng Island. Mo Island? What's cute? When Mo Kyung heard that the place he was going to was Meng Island, he was a little surprised. What is this? Meng Island? Meng. Are you sure it's the Meng, he thought? Do you think this name is too cute? I was also surprised when I first heard about it, Wei Lan laughed. That's because you are too young. Luo. Yi pushed up the glasses on the bridge of his nose and said, although the cuteness of Meng Island is not what you think of, its meaning is indeed the meaning of cuteness. See the development and changes of things from the subtle signs. Meng means full of vitality and upward development. When this island was called Meng Island, the word had no other meaning. I see. Mo Kyung nodded. The meaning of words will have new meanings with the development of the times. Just like in the past, chicken only represented chicken, and basketball was just an ordinary basketball. Even if basketball and chicken are put together, there is no it meant something else, but later, it evolved into xiaohizi. Soon, the plane landed on the tarmac of Meng Island. Mo Kayang also understood what it would be like to become a limiter. During the period of becoming a limiter, there must be routine inspections. Anyway, it is to find the reason why he got rid of the nightmare. If he can't find it, he will not keep Mo Kayang locked up. In about a year, Mo Kayang will be released from the restricted state. On the one hand, if there are no major problems in a year, there should be no serious impact on the characteristics. After all, during this year, the doctoral researchers of the shelter will test all aspects. If these tests cannot be found, then there will be no problem when you return to normal life. This is not the carelessness of the Blue and White Society, but the self-confidence of the Blue and White Society. Mo Kayang is not afraid of the deep diver effect. The only thing he is afraid of is his absolute. The characteristics of the hit are known. It's not a bad thing to hide something. However, now that we have arrived at the cute island, we can only take one step at a time. On the plane, Mo Kayang can see that the cute island is very big, and after getting off the plane after that, I felt that Meng Island was even bigger. A big city on Meng Island has an area of several districts. I don't know what longitude and latitude this place is at. There are tropical fruit trees and rice fields. And the buildings next to the airport, more like a small town. And the small town is surrounded by high walls. There are only 2 roads, leading to the port and Jichang. And outside the city wall, there are sentry towers and soldiers with live ammunition patrolling. Wei Lan also told Mo Kayang to abide by the rules, not to climb over the wall or run out of the island privately, otherwise, he would be killed directly. Even the members of the Blue and White Club must abide by this rule, and do not leave when they have something to do. If you open the door, you will be shot. But any suspicious person will be attacked. In short, it is very strict. Under normal circumstances, everyone knows the rules, so they will abide by them. If they don't abide by them, it can only mean that there is something wrong in their hearts. Dare to walk through the main entrance, or some other situation. Soon, Mo Kayang put on the restrictor's bracelet again. This thing has Mo Kayang's identity information. As long as he is in the restricted area, as long as he eats, sleeps, or plays games, everyone needs this bracelet. Then, Mo Kayang was taken to what looked like an examination center. Well, our mission is over. Next, Shelley will take you to check. Let's go, Wei Lan said with a smile. Oh? Shelley, Mo Kayang nodded subconsciously and wanted to ask who Shelley was. Hello, at this time, a voice came from behind Mo Kayang. As soon as Mo Kayang turned his head, he saw a foreign girl with blonde hair, blue eyes, a curvy figure, and a beautiful face. Although she was a foreign girl, she was talking about speak pure and fluent Chinese. I just arrived and dreamed that I need a full body checkup. Let me take you for a blood draw first, said Shelley. Tisk. Mo Kayang thought for a moment, then he suddenly stretched out his hand and licked Shelley's ponytail. This kind of mean-spirited behavior undoubtedly attracted Shelley's attention. Read the cool novel and go up to Fly Lu Novel Network. Shelley suddenly turned his head to look at Mo Kayang. After staring for 2 seconds, he suddenly pursed his lips and smiled. Instead of being angry, he smiled and said, "What's wrong? Doesn't my hair look good?" "It looks great, it just needs to be raised higher," Mo Kayang said with a smile. Shelley smiled, and then continued to explain to Mo Kayang what to do next. Mo Kayang's eyes moved. Is it just a slight affection? Well, it's not enough. Yes. Mo Kayang once again betrayed his hormones. He fired them, thinking that if Shelley could have a crush on him, just like Chin Ya, then he would be able to take advantage of it. But after all, Shelley not that Chin Ya. Qinya would fall in love at first sight when she saw him. But Shelley only had a slight liking for him. Mo Kian was not impressed by this and immediately started chatting. You speak Chinese well. Ah. Well, after eating something, you can learn all the languages, Shelley said with a smile. Ah. What did you eat? Mo Kian was a little surprised. After eating something, you can learn all languages. What is this? He was a little confused and a little surprised at the same time. Well. However, Shelley thought about it and wanted to say it, but held it back and said apologetically, "Oh, don't ask these questions. Go and change your clothes. Once you've changed, you can start." After that, Mo Kian said, drawing blood and chatting at the same time. "Well, I'm here almost every day. If you feel uncomfortable in any way, you can come to me. I am responsible for all of your health," said Shelley. "Well, every day? Don't you work all year round? What's the difference between that and going to jail?" Mo Kian was a little surprised. In his previous conversation with Wei Lan and others, he learned that the official members of the shelter work all year round. Of course, just like contacting people infected with abnormal effects like Mo Kian, although this is a task, but to a certain extent, it can be regarded as a rest. But the task is a task. Even if the task can be regarded as a rest, it is all year round. But Shelley smiled and shook his head. "It's different. I'm not officially member, I can ask for leave at any time. I get 3 months of leave every year, and I can always save it. The workload is not heavy in normal times. I plan to save enough for 3 years, and then I can take it off in one go, and then I can have a good life. Go and have fun around the world." "Is that so?" Mo Kian nodded, and then curiously asked, "If formal members have no days off all year round, who will be a formal member?" "Well, the responsibilities they shoulder are too important, so they cannot take a complete vacation. They must always stay in a fighting state." Shelley added something that Mo Kian knew. "Simple tasks are considered rest. Of course, participating in training or stationed somewhere is also considered rest. What if something happened at home? Or what should I do if my wife is about to give birth?" Mo Kian suddenly asked. "Well, there will be peripheral personnel to take care of it. Moreover, if a female member is giving birth, she will not be given complicated tasks. She will be directly photographed and stationed in a certain place. There will be many people to take care of her," Shelley said. Anyway, as they chatted, Mo Kian kept releasing hormones. It can be said that Shelley's affection for him was soaring crazily. After that, it was logical. "I was afraid that the characteristics of absolute hits would be exposed," Mo Kian thought, and passed these physical examinations directly by sleeping. "Well," Shelley agreed. "It was not a big deal anyway. The examination went well. All the data of the body were recorded, and the data were normal, and no findings were found. What's so special?" Soon, Mo Kian returned to the apartment with his clothes and belongings. Although there is no signal for mobile phones here, there is internet. In the restricted living area, there are libraries, hospitals, and supermarkets, football fields, basketball courts, tennis courts, etc., all available. Similarly, when surfing the internet here, although you can check things, you can't post any information. You can play games, but you can't chat 073, and you can't communicate. However, Mo Kian didn't even try. His absolute hit must be able to send a message out, for. Then, he met another limiter here. His name was Zhang Wei, and he could tell by his accent that he was Jin from the door. Zhang Wei is also a familiar character. He said there that everyone who lives in this place is a weirdo, which is ridiculous. "By the way, buddy, why did you come in?" Zhang Wei looked at Mo Kian again and asked curiously. "Can't drown," Mo Kian spoke. Jiang Wei waited for a moment and found that Mo Kaiang didn't say much. He was stunned. No. Ah. If not. Isn't it bizarre enough that you can't drown in water, you don't have to breathe, and you're not afraid of water pressure? Mo Kaiang was shocked to hear that. Would you mind me? Jiang Wei smiled and said, do you know why I have lived here for half a year? Mo Qian was speechless. Well, are you still proud? Just listen, Jiang Wei said to himself again. They said I was infected by something, Shuk Beta 515. Is it Beta 515? Mo Kaian couldn't help but corrected. He had heard Luo Yi call the wood carving Alpha 531 before, with the prefix letter being. What Jiang Wei said was definitely not Shuk Beta, it should be. Ah yes, Beta 515. That thing is just a mosquito swatter. In the middle of winter, it even bit me. Oh boy, this bag is still not healed after half a year, Jiang Wei said, rolled up his sleeves again, and saw a big mosquito bag on his left elbow, as if it had been bitten not long ago. Then what? Mo Kaiang asked. Hey. Jiang Wei smiled. They said that after a mosquito bites a person, it will spread some kind of meme into the person's blood, change the body's own blood, and turn the blood into other substances. Everyone is different. Mine is a cuttlefish soup. Mo Kaiang? Ink, cuttlefish soup. Yes. It's cuttlefish soup. Jiang Wei smiled and said, but don't worry, you will only be infected if I inject my blood into your blood vessels. Otherwise, it doesn't matter even if you eat my blood. Then, Jiang Wei took off the band-aid on his index finger, and warm cuttlefish soup oozed out from the wound. Then, Jiang Wei smiled at Mo Kaiang and said, would you like to try it? Mo Kaiang. He took a deep breath and felt that his three views were shattered. But then, something even more outrageous came. Next, Mo Kaiang was led by Jiang Wei to get to know others. And these people are all infected with abnormal effects, and each one of them is very outrageous. Some people have no brains, but they can live normally. Some people are tree people, watering themselves with a kettle. There is a person with a weird face. It's a two-dimensional face, just like the people in the anime have come to reality. It's such a gathering of damn heroes, it's so outrageous. Not to mention Mo Kaiang, countless people in the world are also confused. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Taking stock of the top 10 golden fingers, the protagonist of Wanjie went crazy. Author, Chirp. Chapter 293. At this time, countless people looked at the people infected with the abnormal effects in the picture and marveled. Can you still move freely without a head? This is contemporary Saint Yen. Are there any containment objects that can turn people into tree people? Gee, this contained object is a bit interesting. Could it be that this contained object can create a new race? No, this two-dimensional guy is really against the sky, okay. It's like a person ran out of the anime. Good guy, I was amazed to see him. Second dimensionalization, doesn't it mean that such people will not die even if they are harmed? For it? What the hell is this? How did you come to this conclusion? It is reflected in many anime that no matter whether you are knocked away or hit by a bomb, you will not die. Oh, you said that kind won't die? That's just what the plot requires. Is it okay if the plot requires it? By the way, there is something special about these contained objects. It's true that there are all kinds of wonders in the world. That strange-blooded man is a bit interesting. He turned all the blood in his body into cuttlefish soup. Tisk, is it okay to drink your own blood? At this time, countless people watched with emotion everything that happened in the Dao Golden List. Facing the appearance of so many anomalies, it was an eye-opener. There are countless strange existences in the world, but there are so many it is also in line with the laws of nature. No matter how surprising it is, you can't escape the laws of nature. But this abnormal effect is different. It completely subverts ordinary people's imagination. At this time, in the picture, along with many people infected by weird abnormal effects, Mo Kyung's scalp was also numb. He stuttered a little, but finally reported the status of those infected by the abnormal effect. He, Mo Kyung, could not drown. It can be said that this ability is really mediocre in front of so many people infected with abnormal effects. There were several Chinese people in this place, and Mo Kyung was naturally led by Zhang Wei to integrate into this Chinese circle. Soon, Mo Kyung learned about the abnormal infection status of these Chinese people. The two-dimensional one is called Qiaomen. There were two people with wounds on their hands bandaged, and they were of different bloods. One had hot pot oil in his body, and the other had Izadi's root in his body. There were also two young men. A man who hangs his chopsticks is called a smoker. In his case, he chewed a tobacco plant in the wild. After a while, he was able to smoke out of anything. Yes, anything. Moreover, the more complicated something is, the better it is. Even animals can become his smoke. Even people can be smoked as cigarettes, and judging from the smoker's expression, there is no doubt that the human cigarette must be the best holy product to smoke. Moreover, another characteristic of smoking is that you can only take 10 puffs of anything, and then it will be annihilated into ashes. It's so easy to kill someone. He could even smoke it on himself, but now he only had one last puff left. One more puff and he would be wiped out. The purpose of the blue and white club is to make him quit smoking. But how could that thing be so easy to quit? Fortunately, he has given up smoking now, and will use animals instead. After that, when animals stop smoking, he will smoke plants, dead things. Quit step by step, you will definitely be able to quit. As for the other person, to be honest, this person's abnormal effect is the worst. His characteristic is that once someone scolds him by name, he will catch fire, and if he does not remedy it in time, he will be burned to death. It's quite a glutton. Yes, that's right, just scolding. Whether you curse in your heart or with your mouth, whether in front of you or behind your back, even if you laugh and curse XXX, are you stupid? This kind of thing can be considered a scolding. If he is alone, he will be on fire. The guy's real name is being kept secret. The Blue and White Society also helped him apply for a new identity, and he will use a pseudonym from now on. Of course, this guy also knows who is scolding him. No matter who it is, he knows where the other person is, whether he recognizes it or not. As for why he was infected with the trait, well, he once held a containment object, which he bought online. It was a doll that stabbed a small person. He originally thought about where to stab his boss, but he didn't know his boss's birth date, so he wrote his own. After all, he didn't believe in this stuff either. Then, tisk. Mo Kyung was speechless. A good containment object, and he used it against himself? Although you don't know your boss's birth date, why don't you use your own? Although this kind of feudal superstition is not advisable, you can't use your own no matter what, right? How unlucky is that thing? But unfortunately, this fierce man used it on himself. But now, he has two effects. One is that he is cursed, which means he will catch fire if he is scolded. The other is the price for using that doll, and his price is to be scolded and kill his brain cells. No matter how far away the other person is, his brain can hear it. In fact, if this thing is used against others, even if it kills brain cells, it will be fine, but now, he is both the perpetrator and the victim. Tisk, it's true that there are all kinds of wonders in the world. Mo Kyung was very emotional, the people here are all damn talented people. His inability to drown is really the most common effect. In comparison, even the people with different blood look a bit more novel than him. At this time, countless people in all heavens and worlds were also a little surprised. Good guy, each of these guys is more talented than the last. Especially that fiery man, how did he get such a brain? If this cursed doll were in our world, it seems to be useless. In our world, even if you are scolded, it will catch fire, but if it is extinguished by a random water spell, this thing is just an ordinary fire, and it will not cause any harm to monks like us. Burn the clothes first? Damn it, my clothes are just precious clothes after all, invulnerable to water and fire? Burning on clothes? It's impossible for even Xingxenzi to produce one. Who said it was just ordinary fire? This is obviously a characteristic. Even if your clothes are invulnerable to water and fire, will they still catch fire? Who knows if the fire will also increase to a corresponding level because of the clothes you are wearing? Yes, I feel that things like containment objects should no longer be viewed in the same way as before. If the fire really increases the temperature or level due to the characteristics of the clothes, and then ignites, it will not be poured by ordinary water. It's destroyed. Ordinary water can't put it out, so just use more powerful water. Anyway, I don't think this curse ability is so powerful. Speaking of which, I think there is something about that smoker. Anything can smoke out it? Can even magic weapons be used to smoke out? If he could smoke a cigarette on the magic weapon, wouldn't this smoker be unworthy of heaven? Being able to smoke from a magic weapon is nothing. If you can even smoke from a magic weapon, can you also smoke from a formation? If you take this smoker with you, no matter how powerful your formation is, if you just go up to it, you will be sucking hard. If you go down 10 mouthfuls, even if it is an immortal formation, it will be broken by you. Damn it, when you say that, it's a bit outrageous. I think the alien blood effect is okay. Can any substance become blood? Can spiritual energy also turn into blood? Reiki is spiritual energy, so why is it possible for gas to turn into blood? Then use the spirit liquid. Damn it, I discovered that all of these guys are talented people. If a person has spiritual liquid blood, isn't this the source of walking practice? Worry, how do you guys grow your brains? Can you think of this? At this time, countless people were discussing and amazed. The characteristics of those infected by these abnormal effects really opened the eyes of countless people. They said there is something. It was also said that if this strange blood effect is placed in the world of immortality, it is really possible to randomly produce spirit liquid and blood. Not to mention spirit liquid, any liquid can become the standard for the effect of people with different blood. As for whether the smoker can break the formation or even the magic weapon, there is no doubt that the priority of abnormal characteristics it must be higher than natural objects. What magic weapon is there? In the face of abnormal characteristics, he is just a younger brother, the kind that can be beaten casually. At this time, countless people looked at the Dao Golden List again. Mo Qian quickly became familiar with everyone. Soon, he learned more. He knew that after the restriction was lifted, he could participate in the training and assessment and join the society. However, he needed to be recommended by the administrator, and there were only 3 places a year. However, under normal circumstances, the administrator I wouldn't recommend it. As for whether there are any hidden conditions, I don't know. Of course, the conditions for becoming a peripheral member are very simple, which is to study the standard course, know what to do and what not to do, and sign a confidentiality agreement. As for Mo Qian, to be honest, after seeing so much, he would naturally not think about becoming just an ordinary person. Instead of leaving here, it would be better to become a peripheral member. Dang dang, well, at least that's what Mo Qian thinks now. Soon, Mo Qian went to overturn it. The cafeteria is a buffet with Chinese and Western food. The chef is also there, and this chef is also interesting. He is also infected by the abnormal effect. His ability is that no matter who he talks to, the sound it can't come from the front. Maybe he speaks from behind you, or from the side. It's useless, and it doesn't need to be useful. As long as it doesn't affect your normal life. Qian Wangzhao, of course, Mo Qiang still thinks that this ability is a bit interesting. If he makes a surprise attack, if he shouts, others will definitely look in the direction of the sound. At this time, he can directly attack by surprise. Mo Qiang thought to himself, and then began to think about what kind of talents would be recommended to become official members. If you think about it carefully, people who are restricted are actually no different from ordinary people. At most, he just has the ability. But most are safe. But in the past 3 years, no restrictor has become a formal member. What's the point? Well, if an ability is usable, controllable, and safe, there is no doubt that the Blue and White Society will also allow official members to be infected with this characteristic. By the way, that's right. Therefore, apart from the fact that that kind of ability is the only one that Blue and White Society will absorb, other aspects, toilet. Anyway, it should not be based on ability, at least not on ordinary ability. If he wanted to become a formal member. Soon, through Zhang Wei's introduction, Mo Qiang got to know many unique guys. One was a black man who could pull out a control knife just by touching it on his body. There is also an old white man. Every time he sleeps, he is equivalent to being 1 year older. There are even all kinds of weird storage objects. Fortunately, at this time, Na Kiaoman showed Mo Qiang the way. If he is interested and wants to know more, he can go to class directly. That teacher is a formal member and knows more. Taking stock of the top 10 golden fingers, the protagonist of Wanjie went crazy. Author, Chirp. Chapter 294. At this time, Mo Qiang accompanied Mo Qiang to the library, planning to go to the so-called class. To be honest, Mo Qiang really wanted to know what this containment object was and where it came from. What the hell is it? How specific is the harm? He really wanted to thoroughly understand the concept of contained objects. Soon, after having breakfast, Mo Qiang strolled to the library alone. He can borrow 3 books to read through his bracelet, or he can sit here and read as he pleases. He searched around and found that this was really an ordinary library, providing a place for study, and there was no secret information. He thought for a while and then went to the teacher next to him. There is another person in this classroom, a muscular man, and this strong man is holding a book and reading it. Mo Qiang looked at the title of the book, Good Guy, The Legend of the Condor Heroes. Looking at this strong man again, he is clearly a foreigner, but he looks at it with gusto. You are here, Mo Qiang. Suddenly, the strong man glanced at Mo Qiang and said calmly, I thought it would take a few days for you to come. You know me? Mo Qiang was stunned for a moment. My name is Andreevik, you can call me Lauan. I've read your profile, but I didn't expect you to take the initiative so quickly, Andre spoke. Mo Qiang discovered that Andre was a lousy speaker in Chinese. However, Mo Qiang was not surprised. He said, anyway, idle time is idle. There is no one to do the research I promised Shadow. How could it be that fast? Doctors are very busy. I guess they won't have time to take care of you until next month, Andre said with a smile. Tisk. Mo Qiang was a little speechless. He didn't expect that he would have to wait in line to be studied. Andre seemed to know what Mo Qiang was thinking, and explained the restrictor will not ask for it as soon as he comes. Participate in the trial unless it is an emergency. After all, there are too many things to study here. Effects like yours that do not affect normal life will naturally be put in the back row. The doctors have something urgent to study, and some things are even related to the lives of thousands of people. I see, Amokyang suddenly understood. Everything has a priority. Obviously, those more dangerous characteristics are the things that need to be solved first. Well, my mild effect, doesn't this just prove that the deep diver effect is suitable for humans? Letting people touch wood carvings is equivalent to conquering the sea. Isn't this a good thing? Amokyang asked subconsciously. Anyway, he didn't think there was anything bad about this wooden sculpture. Conquer the sea. Although humans can now make various navigation equipment and diving equipment, have humans really conquered the sea? Obviously. No. 437 water pressure, oxygen. Everything is an obstacle. If everyone obtains the deep diver effect, good guys, the underwater city can be opened directly. However, Andre laughed, shook his head and said you're wrong. If everyone had this idea, humanity would be over. What's the meaning? Amo. Kyan was stunned for a moment, and then he said as if he had thought of something, oh, you mean nightmare. Indeed, nightmares are indeed troublesome, but this can be regarded as the price of conquering the sea. A few determined people must be willing to become deep divers. There is indeed no solution to the nightmare. But to be honest, it is just a nightmare, and it is not real. So what if you have nightmares while sleeping and are awakened by the suffocation pressure? Anyway, compared to being able to conquer the sea, this price is nothing. However, Andre still shook his head no. Not just a nightmare. You underestimate the containment objects. Did you know that there were D-class personnel with deep diver effects, but they were still killed by water pressure? What? Amokyang's pupils shrank. At this time, he heard Andre explain the depth that deep divers can adapt to is related to the depth experienced by nightmares. If you dive to 1,000 meters deep in nightmares, then reality will be different. You can dive to 1,000 meters, but once you pass this depth, the deep diver effect will disappear immediately, and people will die immediately. Amokyang's face changed. There is no doubt that when Andre said this, D-class personnel must have tested it, and someone must have died before they knew about this feature. At this time, listen to Andre continue. Said if we get alpha minus 531 and think that humans can conquer the sea, there will be no doubt that many people will die. But now, this danger has been tested by D-class personnel, and we know this features also have such hidden dangers. Amokyang nodded, it was indeed the case, and then he said now that it has been measured, we only need to record the depth of the dive. Moreover, nightmares will continue to occur, and the depth will continue to increase, surpassing the Earth's oceans once you reach the depth. Can't you just wander around in the sea? Are you sure it has no other dangers? Andre spoke again. As soon as he said this, Amo was speechless. Immediately, he came to his senses. I understand, the properties of the contained objects are good and bad. No one knows how many hidden dangers they have. On the surface, what appears to be a beneficial effect on humans may contain unknown dangers. Good. The greatest understanding of human beings about contained objects is our ignorance of it, CDCB. Andre closed the book and continued. All peripheral members, including formal members, must have a sense of containment. When I give lessons to you restrictors who are willing to become peripheral members, I often have to correct one thought. What? Amokyang asked. Andre looked at Amokyang, stared at Amokyang's eyes, and after staring for a long time, he smiled and said, when you discover power beyond common sense, you always think about what good it will do to yourself. The ink stagnated for a moment. Isn't it like this? Is that true for everyone? Although the effect of contained objects is strange, it is also very powerful. Basically it can be regarded as a superpower. After having superpowers, who wouldn't think about the benefits to themselves? Even people with different blood will wonder if their blood can be sold for money. People's instinctive thought is to feed themselves well and clothe themselves well, and then live well on this basis. Make money, don't be shabby. But, Andre said with a smile, many people have this kind of thinking. It is even engraved in people's bones and genes. However, just because of this kind of thinking, I don't know if it has caused any harm to the world throughout the ages. Impact trauma. Why are contained objects called contained objects? They are an unnatural creation of the world. We cannot use common sense to understand or recognize it. They have too many unknowns and too many dangers. Without them, human beings can still develop forward because we can summarize the laws of nature. However, after having them, we have to identify its characteristics, suppress its harm, and use a lot of manpower and material resources to prepare containment measures. When doing anything, you often cannot consider the positive effects. You also need to consider the negative effects. Only in this way can it be called measurement. The same is true for contained objects, even more extreme. Other things can be measured, but for contained objects, you must first consider what harm it will cause, what disaster it will bring to humans, and whether it has any hidden dangers. Can its power really benefit mankind? Instead of thinking about how to use it first. If this idea is not corrected, you will not be able to become a peripheral member. If you want to become a formal member, you need a firm sense of inclusion. We control. We contain it. We protect. At this time, following Andre's words, Mokayan finally understood what the Blue and White Society had been doing. Similarly, countless people in the world also had a brand new concept of the Blue and White Society. We control, we contain, we protect. Good guy, is this the Blue and White Club? This concept is still possible. Not bad, there is something. Is this the Blue and White Club? Control, contain, protect. Gee, the concept is good, but is this concept of protecting all mankind really good? Gee, I think it's still not as attractive as the one-on-one model. The whole human race is too big, and I just want to protect my own 1/3 of an acre. This is the difference between people. They protect all mankind and put all the responsibilities and burdens on them, but you all just think about your own good. So what if? No, how do you say that sentence? If you are poor, you will live alone, but if you are rich, you will have many wives and concubines. God has a lot of wives and concubines, so if he is rich, he can help the world. Anyway, no matter what, I have to wait until I am full and I have eaten enough before I can let others eat. If I am about to starve to death and give my last ration to others, isn't that stupid? You may think this kind of person is stupid, but I think this kind of person is great. I can't do it, but it doesn't stop me from admiring this kind of person. People. There is no doubt that the Blue and White Club must be organized like that. Tisk, is it blowing? Is this blowing up? It's just a casual remark made by one person, and you start to brag about it. Haha, yes, maybe the Blue and White Club is not as great as you think. Tisk, that's embarrassing, right? Anyway, I feel that the Blue and White Society is definitely not as glorious and great as it appears on the surface. You know, underneath the glory and greatness, there are also shadows. No matter how upright a person is, he still has an unknown side. Anyway, I don't think this Blue and White Society is a good bird. Conspiracy theory, right? At this time, countless people in the world are looking at everything in the picture, discussing and talking about it. It is really like a group of demons dancing around, and they can talk about anything. As for what the Blue and White Society is like. Anyway, Mokayan believed what Andre said. After all, he had personal experience with things like contained objects. Although he didn't have much contact with Andre, when he came out, he realized it clearly. But the realization came back again, and he still looked at Lauan and asked, are there no containment objects that are completely beneficial to humans? Have. Andre nodded, but there are too few such containment items, and it takes time to test them. It takes a long time to explore and be sure. We cannot take other shelters lightly just because a few shelters are friendly. We learned this lesson many times when we first founded the company. If a contained object cannot expand in a controlled manner, no matter how friendly it is to humans, it would rather not be used. Mokayan nodded, but he was secretly thinking about his ability. His absolute hit appeared inexplicably, and it had nothing to do with any items on his body. In terms of nature, he is also a contained object. He has been trying to control it as much as possible, to understand and explore his own abilities. He is also afraid that if he shoots indiscriminately, he will cause some big trouble. He must know his own abilities. Only when everything is known can it be controllable. In essence, he and the Blue and White Society have the same concept of exploring contained objects. However, he is in charge of himself, while the Blue and White Society is in charge of all contained objects. He remained calm, looked at Lauan again, and asked, by the way, you said before that containment objects have existed since ancient times and have brought great impact and trauma to the world? Meaning, is there a containment object that can subvert the entire world? To be honest, he is now a little curious about the contained objects. He is curious about what is the strongest contained object? Lauan looked at Mokayan in surprise. After thinking about it, he smiled bitterly and said, as far as I know, there are more than 50 contained objects that are enough to destroy all mankind. 10 of them can destroy all mankind by themselves. Some of them even we don't have good containment measures. We can only say that so far, mankind is still safe. Mo. Kayan was stunned for a moment, and then he swallowed. You mean, some of the contained objects could destroy the whole world and humanity at any time, maybe in the next second? Lauan looked at Mokayan, was silent for a while, and then said, you don't need to know too much. Some of the contained objects are even scarier the more you know about them. Even I only understand a little bit. There are only 2 people who handle the data of world destruction level containment objects that I have seen. At this moment, Mokayan felt very heavy. He never expected that it would be like this. The world could be destroyed at any time. Humanity could be destroyed at any time. Who would listen to this kind of sword of Damocles hanging above his head? Who is not desperate? At this time, Lauan continued, to be honest, you are very smart, and you can understand many things at once. I have read your information and I know what kind of person you are. Having said this, Andre paused, stood up, looked at Mokayan, and said, Mokayan, are you willing to become a peripheral member and join the cause of Deo Lanbai Club? Become a peripheral member, Mokayan paused. Although he really wanted to become a peripheral member, becoming a peripheral member seemed not as simple as imagined. Next, Mokayan learned more about the Blue and White Club from Andre, and learned more about it. Peripheral members. To be honest, the Blue and White Society is huge and a very powerful world organization. There are Blue and White Society industries all over the world. 9 levels of the world's top charity funds are managed by the Blue and White Society. After all, some shelters, if you want to contain objects, you also need huge funds. Anyway, as long as a member of the Blue and White Society acts, as long as he is in the contracting country, he can apply to mobilize relevant forces to do things. As for why the Blue and White Society has such a transcendent status? Of course, trust. There is no way, the previous experience was too painful, and each country did not want other countries to control this power. Finally, the Blue and White Society appeared. It does not participate in politics, the information is completely open, and a firm belief in containment. This is why the Blue and White Society exists and is trusted by all countries. As for the peripheral members, to be honest, only a small part of the peripheral members know. After all, many peripheral members do not know each other. Sometimes there will be an abnormal situation reported by one peripheral member to another peripheral member. As for the benefits of peripheral members, well, although they are only peripheral members, their backers are also Blue and White Club, and trivial matters in life can be solved casually. Even if you meet a rich second generation, even if this rich second generation has great influence, it is not enough in front of the Blue and White Society. Violence. No, 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 if you use violence, is it still called the Blue and White Society? Blue and White, of course the company will go through normal channels. A professional team of lawyers can make him drink. Understood? Mokayan nodded, then looked at Andre, and said in a deep voice, I feel like I know now, is it possible for the human race to skyrocket without being destroyed by the containment? Andre said with a smile, you can guarantee that the Earth will not be destroyed in 1 year hit by a meteorite. This. Mokayan frowned. You said before that some contained objects do not have good containment measures. In other words, in fact some people are standing on the cliff and may fall at any time. Can you bear it? Lauan said in a deep voice, if you don't do it, you will definitely die. There is hope if you do it. We can only do the best we can before the worst results come. Blue and White Society will not stop working hard. Mokayan was silent for a while, and then laughed. I understand. I am willing to become a peripheral member of the Blue and White Club. Taking stock of the top 10 golden fingers, the protagonist of Wanjie went crazy. Author, Chirp. Chapter 295. At this time, countless people looked at the conversation between Andre and Mokayan on the screen, and they were filled with emotion. I knew that the Blue and White Club was definitely not as dark as some people thought. If you don't do it, you will definitely die, but if you do it, there is hope. We can do the best we can before the worst results come. Blue and White Society will not stop working hard. What a Blue and White Society, this kind of belief is not a firm Taoist heart. If these people can implement this belief, they can achieve great things in any immortal world. Indeed, this belief is remarkable. Laughing to death, isn't it just a belief? Is this all worth bragging about? Haha, in fact, some people don't even have their own goals in life, or even their own beliefs. Are these people not the kind of puppets who are walking dead? Indeed, this kind of person is just a puppet. Is Mokayan now a peripheral member? So fast. From becoming a peripheral member, then becoming a formal member, and finally in the unified Wanjie is, right. At this time, countless people were discussing and watching everything that happened in the picture. And at this time, in the picture. In the next period of time, Mokayan often came to see Lauan. After 2 weeks, he understood a lot. In this world, there is not only the Blue and White Society. There are various small organizations all over the world, almost all of which are enemies of the Blue and White Society. In those small organizations, they either regard the contained objects as gods, or they were controlled by the contained objects. These were the objects that the Blue and White Society wanted to destroy. At the same time, Mokayan also learned about the conditions for becoming a formal member. According to Lauan, the Blue and White Society had something to identify spies, and it was a piece of big stone. That stone can detect a person's goals. Anyone who joins the club must pass that test. If the goal is not in line with the purpose of the Blue and White Society, no matter how many people recommend it, it will be useless. In the same way, this stone can also identify the members. Whether the goal has changed, whether someone has taken away the body, whether something has twisted the mind. If there is something that can be hidden from the stone, there is no way. After all, the Blue and White Club also has the rules of the Blue and White Club. If the members violate the rules, even if he is not a spy, how to deal with it, or how to deal with it? Blue and White Society, order is the sky and faith is the earth. No one can violate it. Regarding the stone, Mokayan expressed a little pain. To be honest, he not only wanted to become a peripheral member, but also want to become a formal member. He doesn't want to be like most people, living in the sun in ignorance. Just like Lauan said, he also wants to work hard to do something. At least he did it, participated in it, and worked hard. This is what he wanted. However, after knowing that he became a positive after the members' conditions, he lost confidence again. Sure enough, becoming a formal member is not as simple as imagined. The hidden conditions for formal membership are belief and goal. They don't necessarily need strong people, they just need companions, people who can fight for their whole life. A salty fish like me is only suitable for being a peripheral member, right? Mo Kyung smiled bitterly. What's more, his ability is also a big problem. Even if he said that his ability is controllable, who would believe it? Now that he has discovered that there is such a big threshold, he can I put that thought aside temporarily. Time passed by unconsciously. It was also the 18th day of Mo Kyung's stay on Meng Island. A fleet of ships was parked on the pier of Meng Island. From a distance, a huge fleet could be seen. A crane placed a huge metal box on the car. A team of at least 300 people escorted the vehicle and drove slowly towards Mendeo town. Those with restrictions were attracted by such a big movement, and they all very curious. The manager Lao Wang said that this thing is a new containment object, so there is no need to take care of it, just do your own thing. It's a gamma-level containment object. Lauan glanced at the escorts and suddenly said, "Oh? Have you seen the elucidator?" The manager Lao Wang looked at Lauan and asked with a smile. The elucidator? At this time, Mo Kyung also came and looked at Lauan with some curiosity. But obviously, Lauan didn't say anything. He just said, "You happen to be here. I just received a notice that the doctor asked you to go to the research institute to cooperate. A test. Ah. Now. Didn't you say it would be a month later?" Mo Kyung was stunned. "I just said it casually, do you take it seriously? How do I know about the doctor's arrangements? Maybe they have an idea of your situation," Lauan said with a smile. Mo Kyung looked at the huge metal box going away and guessed, is it related to the new container? "What are you thinking?" Lao. And curled his lips and said, "Dangerous things are done by D-class personnel, so don't worry if you let them go." Mo Kyung nodded. Then, under the leadership of Lao Wang, he went to the research institute. The research institute stopped when it reached the third floor. The ball elevator led to a fully enclosed room. There were some heavily armed people in the room. Personnel, all wrapped in white combat uniforms and wearing helmets. Report, the restrictor Mo Kyung is in place. As soon as Lao Wang saw the person, he spoke directly. The armed security guard took out an instrument and said, "Please put your hand on it." Mo Kyung did as he was told. The instrument scanned the bracelet on his hand, and soon, Mo Kyung's information appeared in the instrument. Identity confirmed. At the same time that the armed man spoke, the door on the left side of the closed compartment opened directly, indicating that Mo Kyung could go in. Mo Kyung nodded and went in. This is also a closed room. In the room, there is another researcher in white coat. The researcher pointed to the chair and said, "Please sit down, do you need something to drink?" Mo Kyung shook his head and sat on the chair at the same time. At this time, the researcher continued, "Please put on the microphone and look this way." As the researcher spoke, he saw that the wall of the car suddenly unfolded, revealing the transparent glass behind it. Through the glass, Mo Kyung saw another room. He visited a bed somewhere, and on the bedside was the wooden sculpture he had come into contact with before. At this time, there was a young man sleeping soundly with his eyes closed on the bed. At this time, the researcher continued, "Hello, Mo Kyung, you can call me Dr. Sang, Alpha-531, the one in front of you. Do you recognize this wood carving?" "No," Mo Kyung nodded. Dr. Sang added, "After experiments, we found that people who are exposed to alpha-531 will fall asleep immediately after lying down and closing their eyes. After falling asleep, they will fall into a deep diving nightmare, which will last at least 5 hours. Will wake up on its own. If there is an external disturbance, the dream will be interrupted, but the dream will continue the next time, seemingly endlessly. I won't go into details about the deep diver effect brought about by this kind of dream. I want to confirm again. Can you determine how many nightmares you have had in total? Kyan nodded and affirmed 9 times, Dr. Sang said very good. I had no clue at first. Knowing what the members were asking for help, I finally determined a feature of alpha-531 regarding nightmares, that is, people with the psychic resistance effect can break the dream independently. When the dream is broken 9 times, the nightmare ritual will disappear. Dr. Sang said, suddenly turned to look at Kyan, and asked in a deep voice, Kyan, you have a psychic resistance effect. Kyan looked confused. It's just that the mind-bending effect doesn't work on you. At this moment, another voice suddenly sounded. Kyan saw that the young man lying on the bed in the opposite room suddenly sat up. It was a pale-skinned young man with a haggard face and fish eyes. Those words were this young man said it. But at this time, the young man sighed, Doctor, this thing is useless, I still can't sleep. Before Kyan could say anything, he saw the young man grabbing the wooden sculpture again and speaking again, Doctor, do you want to test whether I have the deep diver effect? I've touched it more than 9 times. Dr. Sang sighed, but you haven't had a single nightmare, and you can't even fall asleep. However, you can give it a try. At this time, I saw a tank of water appearing on the other side of the room. The young man nodded, sat in the water tank, and slowly sank. Is he a D-class personnel? Kyan saw the scene and asked in shock. However, Dr. Sang shook his head. No, he is the elucidator. The elucidator? Kyan was stunned. He had wanted to ask before, but he didn't think. Is this young man the one who explains the truth? At this time, he listened. Dr. Sang explained the so-called person who explains the truth is someone who has strong self-control and firm belief. To hold, suppress, control, and use the contained objects, the members are the elucidators. In other words, the elucidator himself is the containment method for one or more containment objects. Dr. Sang was still explaining. At this time, the young elucidator emerged from the water tank, shook the water drops, and sighed, no, I still need to breathe. Dr. Sang confirmed the nightmare is a ritual. If you don't accept the nightmare effect, you won't get the deep diver effect. At this time, Kyan also came to his senses, looked at the young man who was elucidating the Tao, and said subconsciously, do you have a container that will not fall asleep? The young man rolled his dead fish eyes, wiped the water drops, and said nothing. Dr. Sang explained he really can't sleep. Kyan suddenly thought of a white man that Zhang Wei had introduced before. That white man would be a year older if he slept for 1 day. It was the effect of a smog containment. Kyan quickly shouted, if you are in a containment where you can't sleep, can things save the person who has been sleeping for a day and aged for a year? Also, that smog, isn't this kind of containment designed to deal with that smog? Maybe you will say that it has many side effects or is dangerous, but if you don't do it, that person will die soon. After all, no matter what the consequences are, he knows how to choose when facing death, right? The young man raised his head, looked at Kyan, stared at it for a moment, and then said calmly, I went there too during the smog. The situation was so urgent that 12 comrades were even infected, and they are now 10 years older. Is this unsalvageable? Kyan was stunned. However, the young man shook his head. There is no containment that makes people unable to sleep. People must sleep, except me. What we can do is to use various technical means and pharmaceutical means to extend life. And you, Amokayan looked at the young man and frowned. The young man smiled and said, I am also infected, but I can't sleep at all. Haha, I have lived for more than 20 years and I still don't know what sleep feels like. This. Amokayan was stunned. At this time, Dr. Sang explained David has never fallen asleep since he was born. Neither sleeping pills nor physical knocking out are of any use to him. Later we determined that he has a psychic resistance effect. So far, he has been exposed to more than 18 containment objects with mind-distorting effects have no effect at all. And David is the most pure and powerful spiritual resistor in the world today, and he doesn't even sleep. He is an extremely rare humanoid containment object. Humanoid, contained object. Amokayan looked at David blankly. At this moment, he suddenly felt like he had found the same kind. Because, he was also a humanoid contained object. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Taking stock of the top 10 golden fingers, the protagonist of Wanjie went crazy. Author, Chirp. Chapter 296. Humanoid containment object. Unexpectedly, even humans can be considered as contained objects. If humans can be considered shelter objects, does that mean animals can also be shelter objects? Are all objects with special characteristics considered to be contained objects? Does that mean that River God and Li Jing are both contained objects? Never sleep, there is something about this, David. By the way, what does this spiritual resistor mean? There was a word about spiritual distortion before, and now there is a word about spiritual resistance. I think I probably understand what it means. The so-called mind distortion probably means distorting other people's thoughts, distorting other people's will, tampering with other people's memories, etc. And spiritual resistance means that it can resist this kind of distortion and tampering. David's words are still absolute spiritual resistance, and he even resists sleeping. Good guy, when did sleeping become a negative effect? If you don't sleep for more than 20 years, won't you die? He should have died suddenly, right? But David is not dead yet. At this time, countless people looked at everything that happened in the picture in amazement. To be honest, this mental resistance and this inability to sleep are really surprising. Unexpectedly, there is such an ability. Everyone was discussing. At this time, in the picture, Amokayan looked at David and pursed his lips. David, like him, was also a humanoid containment object, and could be regarded as his kind. However, David couldn't sleep, and it didn't seem to have any effect on him. In comparison, his ability is much better. At the same time, he also knows very well how important a person who is immune to mental distortion is to the blue and white society. No wonder David can become an evangelist. But he still had some sympathy, looked at David, and subconsciously asked, you have never slept before, can you bear 707? David said quietly, it's okay, compared to the resistance of the mind, no sleep is my true and absolute characteristic. Psychic resistance is only incidental. Well, I have actually been mentally affected by some containment objects, but nothing has ever been able to make me fall asleep. My spirit is always excited, my brain is never tired, my thoughts are always awake, and my consciousness is never not interrupted for even a second. Even if I am infected with the effect of aging 1 year after sleeping, because of my special case, I have discovered that if I don't sleep, I will not age. In other words, the smog that killed many people not only did not kill me, but it gave me the effect of possibly staying young forever, haha. Amokayan looked at David blankly. Although David's tone was weak, he could still laugh and enjoy himself in the midst of suffering. David, Dr. Sang's tone was a little low. However, David said indifferently, don't worry, sleep if you can. If you can't, forget it. I'm not worried about it anymore. Amo Kyan looked at David and sighed softly. A man whose thoughts never cease. A man who was sober throughout. A person who spends 24 hours a day thinking. Amo Kyan felt tired just thinking about it. The human brain needs rest to function. The human brain is not a computer and knows how to be tired. It's like staying up all night playing games. It's okay for one day, but what if it lasts forever? How about this for the rest of your life? How uncomfortable would that be? Never rest, never get peace, until death. No. Perhaps depending on the urine properties of the contained items, you may remain conscious even if you die. Apart from thinking, he could do nothing but stay awake in the endless darkness, feeling the coldness of death. For a moment, Amo Kyan shuddered and looked at David with an increasingly complicated expression. However, David didn't care. At this time, Dr. Sang said, Amo Kyan, since you can get rid of nightmares, it means that you have the effect of spiritual resistance. Amo Kyan is naturally very aware of spiritual resistance and spiritual distortion. During this period, he and Lauan also learn it a lot. Psychic resistance can distort some psychic distortions. This kind of mind distortion is also a big category. Hypnosis, facial sense manipulation, thought distortion, emotional influence, concept change, etc. are all mind distortions. And spiritual resistance is also a big category. But most of them are very single and can only resist certain characteristics. Moreover, often the effect of psychic resistance itself is not the main characteristic, but one of the multifaceted effects. The so-called multifaceted nature is actually the urinary nature of the containment object itself. For example, if a person is infected with a certain characteristic, he will accumulate all his anger, and then on a full moon night, he will release his anger and transform into a monster. Then, conversely, as long as it is not a full moon night, this person will not be angry. No means can make him angry. All anger will only explode on a full moon night. This is called versatility. Most psychic resistance is like this. There are specific resistances to things like resistance to anger, resistance to laughter, resistance to other things like that. And David is indeed the rarest of all-round resistors. Others had mental resistance caused by infection from the containment objects, but David was born with it. Amo Kyan looked at Dr. Sang and asked, so, you asked me to come here today. I want to do a test with you. See where your mind is resisting. Are you willing to undergo a virtual reality experiment? At this time, David's voice suddenly sounded, and he looked at Amo Kyan. Virtual reality. Amo Kyan was a little curious. Isn't this thing something in a novel? Does it really exist in reality? Is it some kind of containment object or something? What should I do? Amo Kyan asked. You'll know soon. Dr. Nathan quickly pushed a cart over. On the cart was a computer and something that looked like a gaming helmet. Virtual reality is probably what you know, Dr. Sang explained with a smile. Damn it, is technology so advanced? Amo Kyan was a little surprised. Many technologies are not for civilian use. On the one hand, the cost of technology is too high. On the other hand, technologies for the public also need to be updated step by step, and there cannot be a so-called technological explosion, Dr. Sang explained. Then, Dr. Sang pointed at the picture in front of Amo Kyan. This thing is actually a monitor, not the one in the room where David is. It's just that the resolution of the graphics card of this thing is very high, compared with civilian ones. It took at least more than 10 years before it looked like glass and real. Amo Kyan was secretly surprised. Good guy, only then did he realize that the so-called cutting-edge technology he had been exposed to was actually just backward technology. As for that, virtual reality test of spiritual resistance. Tisk. Amo Kyan was speechless secretly. His family knew about his family affairs. How could he have any spiritual resistance? It was an absolutely impossible dream for him. Oh, that's not right. If he really wanted to say it, the use of dream breaking is also a kind of spiritual resistance. After all, his breath will shoot out randomly and into the dream, which is naturally equivalent to breaking the dream. As for virtual reality, this is different from a dream. But, Mo Kyung did not refuse. Soon, Mo Kyung put on the so-called virtual reality helmet. He closed his eyes and soon felt a biting cold wind. As soon as he opened his eyes, he saw arrive at a world of ice and snow. The wind is howling, the weather is gloomy, and the sun is not visible. It's cold. It's so cold. What he just chose was the Antarctic environment. Why didn't he to think that this physical sensation could be conveyed so clearly? After about a minute, he opened his eyes again and reappeared in the room. He rubbed his hands, looked at Dr. Sang, and asked how is it? He didn't break the illusion. At the same time, I don't know if his absolute hit can break it. However, he still controlled himself and didn't let himself shoot randomly. That's fine. Anyway, he knew the urinary nature of land-based society. He showed the more abnormal something comes out, the blue and white society will intensify its research and restrict him. On the contrary, the more controllable he is, the more freedom the blue and white society will give him. What? You said you can't explain Mo Kyung's dream situation. So what? If you can't explain it, you can't explain it? Just like David, who can explain why David didn't sleep since he was born? Who can explain where the contained objects came from? Who can explain what those characteristics are? Will this happen? Perhaps the earliest people of the blue and white society thought about research, but this thing has no solution, it is just a bug. Even if you want to break your head, it is useless. Therefore, if you can't explain something, then don't explain it. Containment things are incomprehensible. Once you grasp this point, that's enough. Mo Kyung was thinking in his mind, but on the surface he looked at Dr. Sang calmly, waiting for Dr. Sang's answer. Dr. Sang also looked at his hand. He checked the tablet in his pocket and immediately said, "We have interrupted the test. Although the reality of the cold has been adjusted to the lowest level, continuing it is equivalent to pain simulation while training." With that said, Dr. Sang looked at Mo Kyung again and asked, "Mo Kyung, are you willing to undergo real painful training?" "Painful training?" Mo Kyung asked back. "Yes." Dr. Sang nodded. "I haven't found any resistance in your mind yet. Maybe it's not enough crisis. After all, the nightmare of a deep diver is very painful. Do you want to simulate the torture of infinite suffocation and super water pressure?" When Mo Kyung heard this, he took a breath and felt it toothache. He had experienced that kind of pain personally, and now just thinking about it, he still has some lingering fears. However, Dr. Sang shook his head. "No, the level of a deep diver's nightmare is too stimulating. What I am referring to is the level of basic training of our members' regular will training. If this level can't inspire your mind to resist, then there is no need to test more, because the basic training is already comparable to most crisis pressures in reality." Will training of club members? When Mo Kyung heard this, he became interested and said, "Come on then. I have experienced the nightmares of deep divers. Are you still afraid of this?" However, Dr. Sang said, "You can think about it again. This time, we will create a sense of despair. If your willpower is weak, you are likely to develop mental illness. Of course, we have professional psychological counseling." "It's okay, I want to try it," Mo Kyung said seriously. "Okay, close your eyes, it will start in about 3 seconds. Dr. Sang spoke. After Mo Kyung heard the words, he closed his eyes. About 3 seconds later, he suddenly felt waves of weakness. It was that feeling of extreme weakness and sleepiness. Then, he felt something cold clamp between it pinched his tail. It hurt. Wait, tail. Amokayan was stunned and forced his eyes open. Then, he found that he was being lifted in mid-air by a big hand with a clamp on his tail. And it's a mouse. At this time, the man was lifting him over a large plastic box, then opened the box and put him in. It's time to eat, Zaya, along with the man's voice. Amokayan felt his heart tighten, and a cold feeling came over him instantly. He saw a big snake entrenched not far away, spitting out apricots and heading towards him. Coming from the border tourism industry. Grass. At this moment, Amokayan's scalp was numb, and unprecedented fear enveloped his heart. Run. Non-existent. He can't run away at all. The point is, that snake is such a stupid snake that he can't eat it if he wants to. In the end, the man still had to let him carry him and feed him before he was eaten. Depend on. Amokayan suddenly jumped up from the chair, covered in sweat. Fortunately, he knew that it was a virtual reality, not reality, and he could still stay rational. Otherwise, he would really go crazy. To be honest, he was not afraid snake, but when you become a mouse, when the angle is different, the feeling is different. What he could compare to when he was a human. How are you? Dr. Sang asked. Amokayan grinned. Is this will training, really, quite desperate? Dr. Sang said solemnly, this is actually nothing. Facing the truly terrible contained objects, you will only be more desperate than this. Only those who overcome fear, do not succumb to powerlessness, dare to wave their fists at any time, and maintain fighting spirit can be a true member of the club. Is that so? Amokayan nodded, and then asked, this is just the elementary level, what are the higher levels like? To be honest, it's pretty good that you can still speak normally now. Most club members will have a certain degree of psychological shadow 3.1 after facing will training. Your will is top-notch, Dr. Sang said with emotion. Well, anyway, I just want to bask in the sun now, Amokayan smiled and said. As for the more advanced ones, you don't need to continue. We have already determined that your spiritual resistance will not be stimulated even under oppression. It may have something to do with whether you are awake or not. Dr. Sang said, and then said, you can just follow my assistant to make a record and leave. Next, Amokayan left the room, and then, another person came in, and that person was obviously the so-called assistant. The assistant introduced himself and then began to ask Amokayan how he felt. Feelings and the like are naturally normal. This shows that Amokayan's emotions are not lacking. There is no such thing as hatred, which means that Amokayan has no negative emotions. The assistant smiled and seemed to find it interesting. After looking through the records, he added, your spiritual resistance is very secretive. It is not emotional or sensory. It may only be directed at dreams and is only triggered when you are not conscious. Have you had similar experiences before? It's similar. To break the nightmare situation of deep divers, or, is there anything unusual about your previous dreams? If anything is wrong, say it and think about it. Well. Amokayan frowned. He rarely dreamed, so he had never dreamed before. After all, it didn't take long before his ability appeared. Suddenly, he thought of something. Correct. Amokayan suddenly said. I rarely dream, but when I see someone, I always dream at night. I dreamed that she was the protagonist and would experience something, such as extreme sports, partying or exercise. But most of the time, I sleep. This person's name is Chae-yoon, and she is the administrator of our school library. Taking stock of the top 10 golden fingers, the protagonist of Wanjie went crazy. Author, Chirp. Chapter 297. As Amokayan revealed the situation between him and Chae-yoon, countless people in the world were a little surprised. Come on, are you finally going to reveal Chae-yun's situation? By the way, what on earth is going on? Can you eavesdrop on your heart? Is this Mo Kyung's ability? Or is it something else special? Tisk, I really don't understand. You said he can eavesdrop on people's minds, but he can't hear other people's thoughts? You said he doesn't have the ability, but he uses this ability to know a lot about the Blue and White Society. Perhaps, this is another characteristic of Mo Kyung. It's possible, but I really can't figure out why this is the case. At this time, countless people were discussing and watching everything happening in the picture. But at this time, in the picture, as Mo Kyung told, the assistant became interested. Just to her? Not to others, the assistant asked. Well, no, not at all, just because I have feelings for her, and when I see her, I can understand what she is thinking, and I would dream about her at night. I thought I was in love with her. Mo Kyung smiled bitterly. Mo Kyung knew that Chae-yun was a peripheral member of the Blue and White Society, but he didn't tell him. At this time, he mentioned this matter because he also wanted to see if Chae-yun had induced any containment objects on her body. Something like that. However, the assistant's expression was very strange. He seemed to be familiar with this situation. Then, the operator pressed the tablet. You said her name is Chae-yun, I seem to have seen it in your information. With that said, he brought up the panel and showed Mo Kyung. Is it her? That was Chae-yun's information. Mo Kyung nodded. The assistant nodded and said she is a peripheral personnel, and part of your information was provided by her. On the world, you have had long-term contact, and she is also the provider of Alpha-531 intelligence. What? Is she a peripheral? Mo Kyung pretended to be shocked, and then asked curiously, that's no wonder, was she also a restrictor before, what is the effect? However, the assistant shook his head, looked at Chae-yun's information, and then looked at Mo Kyung. He suddenly thought of something and smiled. You don't have feelings for others but her. Is it that kind of spiritual connection? As if everything is silent? But she doesn't feel this way about you. So, is there something wrong with her, or is there something wrong with me? Mo Kyung asked. This is actually not an anomaly. He stopped and smiled and said, if it can barely be explained by science, if it has to be an anomaly, it is also a universal effect, just like a law of nature, universal and consistent. Well, let's explain it this way. You two may have the same brainwave frequency. The fantasy point of view is that you two have the same mental wavelength and are soulmates. If one party's brain waves are emitted, the other party's brain will receive them as their own thoughts. This situation is rare, and there may not be more than 50 pairs in the world. We have discovered this situation very early, and it has existed since ancient times. And in our club, there are 4 pairs. If the brainwave intensity of both times is trained to the extent that it can be actively released, then even if they are thousands of miles apart, they can feel each other, and even the physical sensations will be transmitted to each other. One side will be in pain, and the other side will be in pain. If you are happy, the other side will also feel happy. If you experience it at the same time, then it will be double the feeling. As soulmates, if they don't get married, they will both be single, otherwise, it will be embarrassing. After getting the answer, the corners of Mo Kyung's mouth twitched. At the same time, he also understood why Chae-yun couldn't receive his thoughts. The main reason was that Chae-yun had passed the training. Although she was not qualified, the training during that period was enough to release her brain waves. Mo Kyung has not received training, so naturally he can only accept it unilaterally. However, this situation can also be controlled. Generally, after you have some experience, you can control it freely. But this control is also limited. When doing something intense, your brain waves are completely out of control. Unless you suppress your desires while doing something, otherwise, you will feel the same way. This is also the reason why you are either married or single. It is really embarrassing. It would be okay if it was the opposite sex, but it would be even more embarrassing if it was the same sex. As for Mo Kyung, it would be okay if he could control his brain waves. He could shoot wherever he wanted, but it was hard to say for Chae Yoon. Mo Kyung. Kyung is aware of the soulmate. This is not an abnormality. As for Mo Kyung's spiritual resistance, it obviously has nothing to do with his soulmate. It can only be temporarily determined that the triggering conditions for his spiritual resistance are very harsh, or he is specifically against someone. These contained objects are effective in psychic resistance. Anyway, there is no big problem. Then, let Mo Kyung go back and wait for notification. Then prepare a dream experiment. If it can't be found again, then he can directly lift the restriction. Mo Kyung secretly said that indeed. Fortunately, he did not break the virtual reality scene, otherwise, he might have been studied here for a while. Anyway, as long as the result is good, he is not worried about the rest. However, at this moment, diddy. The shrill and piercing siren suddenly sounded, and the red light flashed, filling the entire corridor. The assistant's expression changed. Mo Kyung also looked stern. What happened? Mo Kyung asked subconsciously. Containment breach, the assistant said with an ugly expression. Sure enough, the next second, the broadcast sounded throughout the entire institute. Notice to all, containment of Gamma-520 has failed, non-combatants in the research area must be evacuated immediately. Go to the nearest protection cabin. All combatants immediately rushed to the containment area to suppress Gamma-520 and ensure the normal operation of the power supply in the containment area. The main stairway is economically blocked, and underground personnel are prohibited from crossing the negative level. Anyone who is idle should handle it by themselves. The assistant's expression changed. At this moment, he quickly opened the tablet and started uploading data. The other armed personnel also took action quickly. One of the armed men also left a pistol for the assistant. At this moment, the assistant looked at Mo Kyung. Don't be nervous, this gun is to prevent the idlers from fighting for the protection cabin and attacking the researchers. Although it sounds unpleasant, you who have not lifted the restriction are also among the idlers. The protection cabin must be genetically matched by the researcher, otherwise it cannot be activated, and you, definitely don't have it, the assistant said. Mo Kyung frowned. Then what should I do? The assistant thought for a while and said, follow me first. As he said that, he took Mo Kyung and ran to the nearest protection cabin. On the way, Mo Kyung also quickly understood what a containment failure meant. It can probably be understood as a containment failure. Can't your blue and white club prepare more protective cabins? Mo Kyung was also a little anxious. However, the assistant sighed. The cost is too high, and the thing is essentially an iron coffin. It can only prevent nuclear explosions. It is sometimes useful in the face of out-of-control contained objects. Sometimes it doesn't work. The corner of Mo Kyung's mouth twitched. What do you mean it can only protect against nuclear explosions? However, compared with the threat of contained objects, this defense against nuclear explosions is really nothing. So, what do we do now? Mo Kyung frowned and asked. I'll take you to the first floor to find a room to hide in. Well, in fact, in front of the containment object, there is no difference between a nuclear explosion-proof safety cabin and any other room, the assistant said, but the more he talked, the more Mo Kyung felt cold. No one wants the containment to fail. We have no way to control you now. The further spread of the dangers contained in the house is our first choice. Don't think about leaving. Go hide in your room for a while and wait for the society to suppress the situation. Rescue you and me, the assistant said. Then if I go down there and find those capable people for help, Amo Kyung asked subconsciously. However, the assistant said in a deep voice, if the danger of the containment spreads to the negative level, it can only mean that all people will die. There is no difference between going down there and staying up there. This time, Mo being poor really makes my scalp numb. What the hell kind of containment object is this? So scary. Could you please tell me what gamma minus 520 is? I will die to understand, Mo Kyung asked anxiously. Carl frowned, and then he said that is a monster that eats infinitely. It has strong limbs and a huge dragon-like mouth. Its teeth can penetrate the strongest alloy that humans can make. The maximum bite force that has been measured is 45 million newtons. It eats almost anything and can digest anything. Moreover, it only eats but does not poop, nor does it grow. It is like there is a black hole in its body. Its code name is Dowdy. All creatures within 1 meter of it will be devoured by it, or be killed and then eaten. Its containment method is a huge, closed alloy box with a special feeding window. It likes to be fed, so we must continue to feed it, and it must eat at least 50,000 tons of meat every day, otherwise it will break through the facility on its own and actively hunt nearby creatures. Mo Kyung? A bite force of 45 million newtons. 50,000 tons of meat required every day? What the hell? Mo Kyung's scalp went numb again. Can't you kill it? Mo Kyung asked subconsciously. However, the assistant shook his head. It is impossible to kill it with ordinary methods. It also has a powerful mind and must be obliterated with a containment object. The plan for destroying the crime is to send it to someone with the ability to obliterate it. A capable shelter, but the journey is too far, and Mo Island is just a transit point. But I didn't expect that the containment failed here. It must have escaped after not feeding it for too long. Mo Kyung frowned. However, the assistant still shook his head. It's impossible. Even if we can't afford it anymore, it's absolutely impossible for us to make such a low-level mistake. There must be other reasons. The two of them were talking, and soon the assistant took Mo Kyung to the other end of the corridor. It was like a huge well. The inner wall of the well had spiral stairs going down from each floor. Leaning on the railing, you could see the negative floor, and on the -5 floor, there is a hole in the middle of the spiral staircase. In order to save time, some combatants even climbed over the fence and jumped directly, landing in the square on the -5 floor. However, the assistant did not pay much attention to it and found it quickly. After entering the safety cabin, he opened the cabin and sat in. It was only then that he gave Mo Kyung the pistol and even his access card. This access card can access most rooms. Find a room to hide and wait for rescue. As for this pistol, the assistant paused. Don't worry, I can definitely protect myself, Mo Kyung spoke firmly. However, the assistant said quietly, there are some objects in this research institute that may turn you into a monster. If that happens, you can give yourself a shot. The corners of Mo Kyung's mouth twitched. It was only then that he realized that if one contained object went berserk, it would most likely cause a nepotistic reaction, causing other contained objects to also go berserk. Take care and hope we all survive, the assistant said, finally closing the protective cabin. Call, 627. Mo Kyung exhaled a long breath, and it was only then that his eyes became solemn. What should I do next? Find a room to hide in? Or what? He thinks he still has some fighting ability. If you hide, you would be too passive. There must be a lot of information about the contained objects here, but I don't know if I can check some of his ID card. Mo Kyung looked at the access card in his hand, his eyes flickering. Soon, he opened a room and saw that it was empty, like a holding room. He turned around and went to find the next room. Finally, he found a place similar to an office. However, The access card could not open the computer. When you look at the serial number on it, you can roughly understand that this is for a special card. You have to find the assistant's computer. That's easy. Amo Kyung lost a piece of hair and followed it to find the assistant's computer. At the same time, he was not idle. He opened all the doors and took all the paper materials with him. Finally, he found the assistant's office. On the -4th floor. Well, he can't read the paper information. As for those analysis reports, he couldn't understand them either. Who knows which aspect of which container they were studying. After looking at it for a while, he felt helpless and continued walking along the hair. However, just at this moment. Finally, someone is here, help me untie it, please, a low voice sounded. Amo Kyung's heart trembled. Without saying a word, he raised his gun and pointed it in the direction from which the sound came. But what he saw was a young man in blue clothes squatting in front of a door, with his hands handcuffed. He was handcuffed behind his back, and there was another pair of handcuffs leaning against the door. The young man looked at Amo Kyung, stunned for a moment, and then asked, "Are you the restrictor? Are you a D-class personnel?" Amo Kyung narrowed his eyes and looked at that guy, but he never put down the gun in his hand. "Yes, I'm a Class D, but I'm safe. Please, help me untie it quickly. If I am in this corridor, I will definitely die," he said, begging. However, Amo Kyung just shook his head and ignored it, planning to go directly. Amo Kyung knew very well what kind of people the D-class personnel were. These are all death row prisoners. Such people say that they are safe. Laughing to death. Seeing that Amo Kyung was about to leave, the young man became anxious and said quickly, "We are all Chinese, do me a favor, don't ignore me, you are being beaten, where are you from? Maybe we are still fellow villagers." However, Amo Kyung ignored it, took the access card and opened the door next to him. The man's eyes bulged out of his head. He didn't expect that Amo Kyung had an access card. When he saw Amo Kyung going in, he became even more anxious and shouted excitedly, "Don't leave me behind, take me in, it's very dangerous here, it's very dangerous here." Taking stock of the top 10 golden fingers, the protagonist of Wanjie went crazy. Author, Chirp. Chapter 298. At this moment, in the picture, the containment failed and all the energy was released. And countless people in all the worlds looked at the Dao Golden List, and they all became excited. Containment breach. What the hell? And the contained object went berserk. Dowdy. This thing has become a protected object in this world. By the way, this Dowdy is different from the Dowdy in our world, right? What's different? The gluttony in our world means there is no end to eating, right? What's the difference? That is, there doesn't seem to be much difference, they are all gluttonous anyway. Dowdy, by the way, this kind of creature, placed in the mortal world, can indeed be regarded as an abnormal containment object. In other words, in some respects, this abnormal characteristic is very similar to the innate magical power we understand. Similar, yes, but completely different, okay. Indeed, similarities are similarities, differences are also completely different. Is this a containment object? If you feel it, if I were in this world, I could basically dominate everything in this world. At this time, everyone was discussing. At this time, in the picture. As Amo Kyung entered the room and searched for information, it seemed that he spent about 10 minutes, and he had a general understanding of the composition of the entire research institute. However, he did not find an introduction to all the objects, only the numbers of some objects and their locations. The assistant participated in or indirectly designed most of the inspections and updates of containment procedures. Computers are full of this content. Soon, Amo Kyung took out an A4 sheet, wrote and drew on it, and outlined the distribution of most of the contained objects. He also knew the characteristics of Dowdy, in room A3 on the 10th floor below. There is a meat warehouse next to the place where it is kept. Before Dowdy was transferred, long-term preparations had been made. Obviously, there must be another reason for this glutton's rampage. The other contained objects are basically below the 5th floor. But the characteristics information of those contained objects is not available on the computer. Mo Kyung suddenly thought about the D-class personnel outside the door. As a D-class personnel who has been exposed to contained objects for a long time, I think he should know something. So, Mo Kyung went out and looked at the young man. At this time, the young man was already squatting on the ground and crying. Obviously, he had been exposed to the contained objects for a long time and knew very well what kind of harm the contained objects were. It's normal to be afraid. On the contrary, Mo Kyung was a dazed young man who had not yet experienced how terrifying the contained objects were. Even if he knew some, he didn't know completely. The sound of the door opening attracted the D-class personnel. As soon as he saw Mo Kyung come out, he immediately became happy. "Brother, save me quickly, let's hide together." He spoke quickly, fearing that Mo Kyung would ignore him. Mo Kyung squatted in front of the man, looked at his somewhat frightened expression, and asked, "What are you afraid of?" The young man was stunned for a moment, then hurriedly said, "Containment failure, don't you know about the containment breach?" "I don't know what Gamma-520 is, but I know there are some terrible containment objects here, and this floor," he said, but before he finished speaking, Mo Kyung's face changed when he looked behind him, and his face was full of horror. Mo Kyung turned around suddenly and saw a half-meter-high cactus in the corner at the end of the corridor. Potted plants. Mo Kyung's heart sank. He was sure that there was nothing there before, but now there was a cactus. "Don't breathe," the D-class personnel shouted. However, as soon as he finished speaking, snapped, the cactus seemed to teleport and appeared directly in front of the young man. Then, it slapped the D-class personnel in the face. The sharp thorns pierced the face, and the left half of the D-class personnel's face was covered with thorns. And even had a thorn stuck in his eyeball. But he just didn't say a word, closed his mouth tightly, and didn't even dare to breathe out. Mo Kyung finally figured it out, this cactus should have some kind of tracking lock, the ability to exhale. Once it detects someone exhaling within a certain range, it will launch an attack. Woo woo woo. At this moment, the D-class personnel struggled and winked at Mo Kyung, as if to indicate to Mo Kyung to pick off the cactus. Mo Kyung hesitated for a while, thinking that this guy had reminded him before, and in addition, this guy must also know more about the properties of the contained objects, so he held his breath and concentrated, held the cactus pelvic floor, and used force to pull it out. It's pulled out. Then, at the young man's signal, he threw it into the room and locked the door. Call. Only then did the D-class personnel let out a long breath. "Fortunately, you came out, otherwise I would definitely die." "What the hell is this?" Mo Kyung asked. The D-class personnel pursed his lips and said, "Alpha-418, this Donksu is fine. If he is not being roasted, there is no need to be afraid of him, but if I can't move, I will die. Got it? This thing can hunt down targets through the breath a person exhales, and will find the closest one first. If I can't help but gasp, its remaining thorns will pierce me directly." "Is it just locked through a person's energy?" Mo Kyung asked again. "Yes, not bad. All the rooms here are airtight and have only one exhaust system. I can't find us in the room for a while," the D-class personnel said. Mo Kyung nodded secretly, and it was exactly what he thought. At the same time, he also discovered that he also had a way to deal with this cactus. He only needed to shoot his energy into the other world, and the energy would disappear directly. However, Mo Kyung still frowned. Thinking of what the assistant said earlier, His face turned a little ugly. The containment objects are all below the 5th floor. If this thing can run up, it means that all the people in the Blue and White Society are dead. Contained objects can move around, and the cactus, as the D-class personnel spoke, the corner of his mouth twitched again. It wasn't painful, but it was mainly itchy on his face. Amokayan nodded. Indeed, the cactus almost seemed to be able to teleport. Now almost all the combatants went to suppress Doughty, and no one paid attention to the cactus. We can only deal with the big ones first, and then find ways to deal with other contained objects. However, this information also made Amokayan feel nervous. This cactus can escape, and so can other contained objects. Sure enough, the D-class personnel said again, there is another containment object on this floor. Then, he explained, Beta-382 is in a room over there. It happened to be renovated early this morning. Its containment procedures, so it was moved to this level and controlled in turn by 3 D-class personnel, of whom I was one. Amokayan suddenly realized, no wonder this guy is here. At this time, the D-class personnel hurriedly said, brother, help me unlock it quickly, I will definitely die if I'm locked here. However, Amokayan calmly said, D-class personnel are bound to die sooner or later. He knew the position of D-class personnel very well. These people are all death row prisoners. Anyone who can be defined as a death row prisoner must have committed a very serious crime. What is there to sympathize with for such a person? He helped take down the cactus before, but he only paid back the favor this guy reminded him of. However, upon hearing Amokayan's words, the D-class personnel breathed a sigh of relief. Yes, I should have died a long time ago. But it's only a day to live. I would rather redeem myself as a D-class personnel, really. Otherwise, I will go to hell. Joe was executed, and I know a lot of things, and we can help each other. However, Amokayan smiled. There is a witness at the elevator entrance on the 5th floor, and I think it is better to ask him. However, that guy, but he shook his head and said hurriedly as one of the idlers, you shouldn't run around. If you go there rashly, he will probably kill you directly. Amokayan frowned. The guy hurriedly said, I know what you are worried about. Let me tell you the truth, I have 2 effects, both of which were infected during the experiment. One is to turn my blood into high concentration hydrochloric acid, and the other is deprivation. It relieved my pain and gave me an extra pair of eyes. As he said that, he hurriedly raised his head and exposed the back of his head. However, at this time, there was an extra pair of eyes on the back of the head, which was a bit scary. These 2 eyeballs can also be detached and they can exist independently, the young man said again. Amokayan looked at this guy, astonished. No wonder this guy didn't say a word when he was hit by a cactus before, and he didn't see any blood flowing out. The co-author is a person of different blood and has no sense of pain. Amokayan thought for a while, then shot directly, breaking the handcuffs that locked the door. Of course, he didn't take off the handcuffs on his hands. This way, it allows him to move around and ensures that he cannot get violent and hurt others. Tell me everything you know, and then I'll lock you in room, just wait in there for the people from the Blue and White Club to come to you, Amokayan said. Thank you very much. The D-class personnel quickly thanked him. He was about to say something. However, at this moment, screams suddenly came. The 2 were stunned and hurried to the end of the corridor to take a look. Then, they saw that the security personnel who had been guarding here had been attacked by someone unknown and had fallen into a pool of blood. Look at the open elevator door again. Good guy, the corpses of security guards are lying in it, with blood splattering everywhere. Hiss. At this moment, Amokayan stood on his head. What's coming? It's over, so many security guards have been killed, we are definitely doomed to. The D-class personnel sat down on the ground, with a look of frustration on his face. Amokayan frowned. Then some kind of containment object must have appeared. Swish swish, at this moment, black shadows flashed away, incredibly fast. Amo Kyung's pupils shrank, and without saying a word, he started spinning like a top, punching and kicking the air. The D-class personnel were shocked. What the hell is this? But he was also afraid of death. Seeing Amo Kyung do this, he also followed Thomas and spun on the ground. He just hoped that it would be useful. His survival instinct made him seize any opportunity to survive and was unwilling to give up. And on Amo Kyung's side, suddenly, a black shadow flashed away, and he felt a tearing pain in his chest. A large piece of pectoral muscle on the left chest was torn off, dripping with blood. At the same time, his slap seemed to capture something. Suddenly, he saw a terrifying face. It was not a human face, with no facial features. There were only 3 rusty rotating fan blades whirring on the face. Electric fan head monster. And his slap hit the head of the electric fan monster, and in an instant, the monster disappeared. Also disappearing at the same time was one of his chest muscles. It's safe. After a long time, Amo Kyung let out a long breath. At this time, the blood on his chest had stained his shirt red, and the intense pain made him grin. The chest muscles were torn off, and the pain of the flesh was unimaginable. After a long time, he gritted his teeth and recovered. The electric fan head from before has disappeared and is no longer in this universe. Yes, before, he slapped this thing into another universe. His ability is absolute hit. When he saw those security guards die earlier, he knew that there should be a container that was extremely fast. Even those security guards couldn't keep up, and he definitely couldn't keep up. Therefore, he spins like a top, and just being touched by him will trigger his absolute hit, and then he will be exiled to another universe. Sure enough, it worked. And the universe he was exiled to, was actually not a very normal universe. It was the fictional universe he imagined. He imagined a desolate place with no living things and a sea of fire, good for no-no. There were 10 suns in the sky that day. This kind of universe first excludes observable stars in their universe. He also tried to throw something into this universe before, and sure enough, he disappeared in an instant. It can only be said that the world he conceived is not in their universe, so after the absolute hit is triggered, he will directly jump through space and disappear, and arrive in another universe. In order to avoid harming people in other universes, he specifically chose this universe and exiled the electric fan head there. And this universe is called the unlucky universe. This is equivalent to him eliminating a contained object in this world. At this time, countless people in the world looked at Amo Kyung's operation and marveled. What a wretched universe, Tokaju Linkong, what kind of wretched universe is this? However, Amo Kyung's ability is really a bit unbelievable. Absolute hit, banishment across the universe? Isn't this a disguised way to solve all the contained objects? By the way, although it is the unlucky universe, aren't there other life forms in this unlucky universe? Amo Kyung is harming others. Not necessarily. 10 days have passed in the sky, how can there be any life forms in this kind of world? The 10th volley. I heard that in ancient times, there was a 10-day volley in the sky, and Wanjie shot the sun. Phew, ha ha ha, I laughed so hard. Wanjie was preparing to shoot the sun, and then, an electric fan suddenly appeared in front of him, and then... Wanjie? Amo Kyung, I'll hold your mother in my mouth. At this moment, countless people are discussing. At this time, the information world, the unlucky universe? Wanjie? He could see it just at a glance. Because, the unlucky universe that Amo Kyung talks about is their universe. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Taking stock of the top 10 golden fingers, the protagonist of Wanjie went crazy. Author, Chirp. Chapter 299. It turns out that the brief bug era was due to a contained object that was randomly photographed when the Black Master was weak. In the information world, Wanjie looked at everything that happened in the Dao Golden List with a somewhat complicated expression. Previously, through information perception, he knew that there was a bug era during the Tang dynasty, but he never knew how that bug era appeared. Until today, until he saw the electric fan head, he understood instantly. Everything happened because of Mo Kyung? It was because Mo Kyung photographed the electric fan head into their universe, and then, it created the short bug era. However, after the short bug era, because of Mo Kyung, everything ended. Mo Kyung. Wanjie sighed in his heart. At this time, the blue and white world. In the room on Mo Island. At this time, Mo Kyung was waiting for inquiries from his superiors. As for Mr. Go, as his partner, he naturally followed. Master Go looked at everything that happened in the Daojin list and raised his eyebrows slightly. So it was you who made the electric fan head. Mo Kyung smiled bitterly. This Daojin Bang has picked out all the bitter tea seeds. What will happen? Mo Kyung suddenly asked. Now, if you lose it, you are responsible for finding it back. What else can you do? Master Go chuckled. However, when these words fell into Mo Kyung's ears, Mo Kyung's mouth twitched. He lost it and he brought it back. What the hell? How can he find it? It took 10 days. In the sky, there is a world of desolation and silence. Not to mention how to get there. Can we go there? Even if we can go, will we still be burned to death by the sun? Master Go looked at it and said with a smile, let's look at the strategy. Here, what kind of golden list has written down all your strategies. Maybe you will be awesome in the follow-up, end the era of containment, and become the true strongest. Hee, son of luck. Mo Kyung smiled bitterly. What the hell, son of destiny? These 4 words are really not as simple as saying. However, since the guide is out, well, it seems that the guide is not a big problem. At this time, it was accompanied by discussions among countless people in all the worlds. And in the Dao Gold List, the scene continues. In the scene, with a slap from Mo Kyung, the head of the electric fan was sent to the unlucky universe. Mo Kyung and the D-class personnel were finally out of danger. At this point, Mo Kyung breathed a long sigh of relief. At the same time, he was a little lucky that the fan head didn't kill him. If the electric fan head kills him, then his ability will be useless no matter how incredible it is. Although his chest muscle was torn, it's not a big problem, as long as he can survive. However, he was still a little worried about whether he might be infected by 050. However, at this time, he didn't have the temperament to think so much. Although he could barely suppress the pain in his chest still made him grin. At this time, the D-class personnel also came to his senses and asked quickly, how are you? What kind of attack was it? About you. 1. The electric fan head, it scratched me, and then I slapped it, and then it disappeared and seemed to run away. Mo Kyung gritted his teeth, endured the pain, and spoke. The D-class personnel was confused. Holy shit, is this okay? However, although he was surprised, he still believed it. After all, there are all kinds of contained objects. Since Mo Kyung was attacked and is now fine again, some kind of characteristic must have been triggered. Do you know what that electric fan head is? Mo Kyung asked subconsciously. Electric fan head? Have you heard of it? The D-class personnel shook his head. However, maybe there is a switch on his face, and your slap happened to hit the switch, making him virtual, or maybe he stopped moving. What kind of logic is this? Mo Kyung looked at the young man with some surprise. The D-class personnel smiled and said, this is the survival logic of D-class personnel. They observe details, break conventions, break through inertial thinking, and use their lives to gain a chance of survival. Sometimes it seems like a small move. Maybe you can successfully suppress the contained object. This is all based on experience. Whatever it is based on experience. Amokayan was in so much pain that he wanted to curse. When the D-class personnel saw it, he quickly got up, bent down, and said, "Hold me, and I will take you to the infirmary." Amokayan stopped being pretentious. He stood up reluctantly, put his arms around the guy's neck, and just supported him, staggering to the infirmary on the 5th floor. Soon, the two of them arrived at the door of the infirmary. Amokayan swiped his card and opened the door. "Open it directly." Then, the D-class personnel looked around, as if he was looking for something. At the same time, he explained, "I don't know how to use the instruments here, but I know there is a medicine that specializes in trauma. Scabs will form quickly." "What does it look like?" Amokayan asked. "A green bottle with a sign prohibiting oral administration and a special number 96. We all call it 96 ointment," the young man said, still looking for it. Amokayan was in too much pain, so he shook off a drop of blood, and then the blood flew towards a cabinet. Amokayan stepped forward and patted away the blood, opened the cabinet with the access control, and then saw there are rows of green bottles inside, all of which are 96 ointment. "Is it this one?" Amokayan asked. "Ah, yes, yes," the young man nodded quickly. "Uh-huh." Unexpectedly, Amokayan suddenly raised his gun and pointed it at the guy. "What are you doing?" The guy's pupils shrank, and he broke out in cold sweat instantly. Then, boom, the gunshot rang out, and the bullet was fired instantly. Just when the young man's pupils shrank suddenly, the bullet directly penetrated the handcuffs on the D-class personnel. The iron chains rattled. The young man watched blankly as they were being opened. At this moment, he knew that he had gained Amokayan's trust. Immediately, without saying a word, he began to spray ointment on Amokayan. The hideous wound was quickly covered with white foam, and then he found it again, wrap it in gauze, and it's all done. Amokayan could feel that the bleeding seemed to have stopped in a short time, and the wound was numb and itchy. Did he grow up so quickly? Amokayan was a little surprised. He knew that the technology of land-based society was more than 10 years ahead of the outside world, but is this thing so amazing? However, the young man smiled and said, "How can it be so fast? This thing only heals the wound quickly. It is impossible to grow it back. If you are missing a piece of flesh, you will definitely have a scar as big as a bowl. Just leave a scar, it doesn't matter. As long as your life is still there." Amokayan smiled. "Yes, as long as your life is still there," the young man said with a smile. "May I have your name?" Finally, Amokayan looked at the young man and asked. The young man thought for a while and said, "They all call Maine 80083. If my real name is Xiaofeng." "Xiaofeng," Amokayan looks weird. "I am obsessed with Jin Yang. You know." Xiaofeng smiled. Only then did Amokayan ask, "By the way, what did you commit?" When talking about this question, Xiaofeng's expression darkened, he pursed his lips, and said in a deep voice, "I killed people. Most D-class personnel are like this." "Oh," Amokayan raised his eyebrows slightly. Just then, Xiaofeng continued, "I made 5 people stupid. What's even more ridiculous is that for a woman, now that I think about it, I'm really sorry for my parents and my family." "Be exploited?" Amokayan asked back. "No, I'm just stupid." Xiaofeng sighed. "How many times have you slept with someone before you thought it was love?" "Haha, do you know why I killed 5 people? Because, when I looked for her that day, I saw 4 people hanging on her body." The corner of Amokayan's mouth twitched. Full of burly men? He finally understood. Is this the reason for co-authorship? At this time, Xiaofeng sighed again. "When I was in prison, I was very crazy. After the inmates heard about me, they even called me awesome. I also thought I was awesome at the time and thought I was not afraid of death until I came here. Here, I realize how stupid I am. What to say? Amo Kayang asked. Xiao Feng said most D-class personnel will understand the meaning of life as long as they survive the experiment on contained objects, whether it is other people's or one's own. When I see a D-class personnel being killed by my own when the shadow strangled me, the arrogant me completely disappeared. Every time I am lucky enough to survive, I will recall the past. The life before was really wonderful. I worked part-time and would not starve to death. I could go out for a walk occasionally and enjoy life. It was like a fairy-like life. Living is better than anything else, even if you are paralyzed, it is better than death. Even if it's just to eat one more mouthful of food and drink one more mouthful of water, it's still worth it. Even if I try my best, I can only live a few more days. I don't want to end my life with a bullet. Some people don't understand and choose to be executed, but I think they will definitely regret it. At least, they will live less than one day. Mo. Kayang looked at Xiao Feng and said with some surprise, so, you choose to continue to be a D-class personnel. Do you want to obtain the Medal of Will of D? What D of what? Xiao Feng was stunned. It's nothing, said K, just a rant, I've watched too many anime. Kayang hurriedly changed his tune. He realized that the Blue and White Society probably did not tell these D-class personnel about the D-Will medal. If this is told to D-class personnel, then the will of D will not be pure. Tell me all the information you know, for example, that 382, Mo Kayang said. Beta-382, this is what Xiao Feng said before. He always remembered it. It's the thing on the negative fourth floor. Xiao Feng nodded and said quickly 382 is a painting, which depicts a villa in the forest. There is a black figure standing in the window on the first floor of the villa. It must be guarded by at least 2 D-class personnel in turns, one for each person. Teams, 3-hour shifts, a total of 8 teams of D-class personnel are responsible for this work. What happens if you don't observe it? Mo Kayang asked. Xiao Feng said the back figure will slowly turn around, and then, he will turn into a physical entity and run out of the painting, then it will bring confusion, collapse, madness, and hysteria to people. Oh! Mind-twisting kind, Mo Kayang raised his eyebrows slightly. At this time, he heard Xiao Feng continue that thing needs to be locked with the eyes. Even if you blink, even if the sight disappears for a moment, the back will gradually turn around, and then change little by little. It becomes an entity, so 2 people must take turns guarding blink. Oh! Mo Kayang thought for a while and asked again, can you just blink one eye, blinking with both eyes in turn? This is okay, but the error tolerance is too low. You can't guarantee that when you blink one eye, the other eye won't blink accordingly. Xiao Feng said. Well, yes. Mo Kayang nodded, but it is theoretically possible to blink his eyes back and forth. It's just that the error tolerance rate is too low. In the face of contained objects, it's best not to try this method with a low error tolerance rate, otherwise, it will pay the price with life. Will this thing fail? They will definitely panic when they hear the broadcast, Mo Kayang asked. I'm worried about this too. Xiao Feng frowned, but still said but they will definitely not panic. You have to believe in the desire of D-class personnel to survive. The more times this happens, the more they know that they cannot let the painting go out of control. In order to survive, they will also starve without eating or drinking. D-class personnel's desire to survive. Mo Kayang nodded and immediately said then what we should be worried about is, the cactus. Xiao Feng nodded yes, every room will be ventilated after a certain period of time. If the cactus doesn't come to us, it will be troublesome. Yes, if the cactus doesn't come to them, it will definitely go to those 2 people. When the time comes, both the cactus and the painting will lose control at the same time. Just thinking about the consequences makes me shudder. Mind-warping containment object, that thing will collapse when you see it. It is simply not on the same level as that cactus. Cactus, you can still hold your breath and contain him. But what about the painting? It seems that we have to go find them and then take the painting with us. In this way, there will be 4 of us who can stare at the painting better. We can also help each other. Mo. Kyung opened his mouth, and then thought for a while and said, in addition, we'd better go downstairs and look for David, the elucidator. David, the elucidator, is immune to all mental distortions. This painting, in David's hands, can be suppressed very well. However, as soon as these words came out, Xiao Feng was stunned. What? Is there an evangelist here? Mo Kyung nodded. Xiao Feng was excited. With the name of the Taoist, he naturally knew that there was a Taoist. Thinking about it, this containment failure should be easily solved. It's just that. Why go downstairs? Wouldn't it be better if we were upstairs? Xiao Feng couldn't help asking. In his opinion, the further down you go, the more dangerous it is. He would rather find a room to stay instead of running around. However, Mo Kyung has Mo Kyung's ideas. He always wants to. The initiative is in his hands. As a last resort, he can also exile the contained object. In short, as long as he is careful, his life-saving ability should be enough. Soon, Mo Kyung convinced Xiao Feng that anyway, there is strength in numbers, so instead of waiting for the contained object if they go on a rampage, it is better to hand these containment items to the club members. Although it is a bit dangerous, it should not be a big problem if you are careful. Soon, the 2 went out, intending to find the 2D class personnel. However, as soon as they went out, they saw the cactus at the door. Good guy, this cactus came directly to the door. Fortunately, facing this cactus, all you need to do is hold your breath. Moreover, Mo Kyung also tried to blow his breath into other universes, and sure enough, the cactus there was no movement. Immediately, Xiao Feng threw the cactus into the infirmary and closed the door, and then he breathed a sigh of relief. The 2 of them touched the guns on the bodies of the security personnel again. After having weapons, they felt confident. Then, the 2 of them went upstairs. When they opened the room, Mo Kyung saw 2 people in the room, one with blonde hair and one with brown hair, both foreigners. The sound of opening the door attracted the 2 of them. Among them, the blonde immediately shouted in English, I'm going to turn around. As he said that, he turned his head and looked towards the door. Then, he saw Mo Kyung and the 2 of them. The brown-haired man was still looking at the painting. His companion didn't respond for a long time, so he hurriedly asked, what is it? Please speak. Although he was scared to death, he still stared at the painting, not daring to be careless. The blonde man immediately said, it's 083, and there's another person. Xiao Feng also hurriedly said in English, we are here to help. The 4 of them took turns watching, obviously it was much safer. Next, Mo Kyung asked them to hold the paintings and divide the work as best as possible. He would shout out the number if he wanted to blink, and then they would take turns switching. For safety reasons, Mo Kyung also inquired about the abnormalities on the 2 of them. The effect of that brown hair is that it is afraid of seeing green things. Seeing green will make it extremely panic, as if green is the most dangerous existence. Green fear effect. As for the blonde hair, his abnormal effects are interesting. His effect is called by doctors, don't starve to death. When he encounters a fatal blow, he will not die. His death will be frozen and delayed for 10 seconds. At the same time, high-calorie food will appear on his body. The more food appears, the more terrible the damage is. He must eat all these foods within 10 seconds, otherwise, you will die instantly after 10 seconds. and if he eats these foods, his damage will be exempted. Taking stock of the top 10 golden fingers, the protagonist of Wanjie went crazy. Author, Chirp. Chapter 300. At this time, countless people looked at the picture and the blonde hair in the picture, and they were all surprised. Good guy, there's something to this damage immunity feature? My heart is moved. Damage immunity? Death is delayed for 10 seconds, 10 seconds. In 10 seconds, I can do countless things. If Pandeo had this characteristic, wouldn't he be directly invincible? Invincible? You are an invincible hammer. If others hide the food you explode, or run away, why don't you lose it? So what? The moment the food came out, I opened my mouth and sucked it in, swallowing it directly. In short, this ability, as long as it is practiced well and used well, is absolutely incredible. Indeed, although it will be snatched away and there is a risk of death, this is already an extra life. In 10 seconds, for us monks, we can really do too many things. If I practice another devouring skill, not to mention swallowing the sky and killing the earth, I just need to learn a kind of moon-swallowing magical power, or sun-devouring magical power, etc., then I will really be invincible. Tisk, this poor Taoist is really excited. I don't know what kind of containment object caused this characteristic. This characteristic falls on this D-class personnel. It's really a waste. If I have this characteristic, I will be the only one in the world. Oh? Do you also want to be a Tathagata? Although it is said to delay death, it does not mean that this characteristic is really invincible. Who knows if this thing has an upper limit? Maybe, some characteristics can still bypass this invincibility, but you still have to die. Even so, you can still save your life, right? So now I want to know, what will happen if those foods are destroyed? Obviously, destruction is the same as taking it away. If you can't eat it within 10 seconds, you will die. To put it bluntly, this ability is just like that, nothing too heaven-defying. It's pretty good, isn't it? After all, he is invincible. As long as he protects the food, his error tolerance is quite high. At this time, countless people were discussing, and they were really shocked by the blonde's ability. At this time, in the picture, Mokayan was still trying out the blonde's ability. Sure enough, after a shot hit the blonde's head, a lot of food exploded around him, including energy bars, beef jerky and the like. It was about 500 grams. This was not a lot, and he finished it in 4 or 5 seconds. And for the rest of the time, he was invincible. Of course, this invincibility is immune to fatal injuries. As long as it is not fatal, it can still cause harm to him. Invincible. To be honest, this is really not as invincible as countless people in the world think. At least, for Blonde, he is not truly invincible. This is because the food that explodes from his body is converted according to the amount of damage. If it is a normal shooting, he can still withstand it, but if he is killed by a contained object, the food that explodes will be almost invisible to him. It's impossible to finish the meal. Even if the doctors of the Blue and White Society find his stomach and mouth to make him grow bigger and digest the gastric juice faster, it won't work. There is a limit to what he can endure. Moreover, he is exempt. The injuries are only fatal. If he is seriously injured, or his hands and feet are interrupted, and he is unable to eat food, he will die. Of course, having said that, countless big men in the world still feel that this ability very good. Because, for them, rebirth of severed limbs is not a problem at all. What's more, they can swallow countless foods with just one opening of their mouth. Different abilities have completely different effects on different people. But at this time, in the picture, the blonde man is still inducing vomiting. He has become very skilled in using this ability. He does not need to digest the thing, he only needs to eat it, and then he can be completely exempt from damage. He has to keep his stomach empty at all times. In this way, he can live longer. At this point, the characteristics of blonde and brown hair are understood. A group of people arrived at the elevator, and Mo Qiang asked Xiao Feng, besides the elevator, is there any other way down? Gone. Xiao Feng shook his head. There is only an elevator, but after going down, you can take the stairs when you get to the -6 and -10 floors. I remember, can your eyes be buttoned down? Suddenly, Mo Qiang asked. Xiao Feng nodded. Yes, I know what you mean. Indeed, my eyes can share the same field of vision even if they are thousands of miles apart. Clairvoyance. Mo Qiang sighed. If that's the case, then it plays into his hands. Then, he took off Xiao Feng's eyeballs, placed them on the security guard's body, and then put the body into the elevator. Then, Mo Qiang pressed each button in turn. Floor elevator, then, just wait. Soon, the elevator goes down. Because Mo Qiang pressed the button, it will stop for a moment on each floor. This allows Xiao Feng to see clearly what is happening below. The more as he went down, Xiao Feng's expression became more solemn. Corpses, many corpses, are not far from the elevator door. They seem to have died along the way, Xiao Feng said. Soon, he described the death situation. It was most likely that the fan head killed him. That electric fan head is undoubtedly cruel. But when he arrived at Mo Qiang's place, he fell into trouble. I can only say that he was unlucky. However, I can't care about that much now. Then, we went to the -7th floor. But on the -7th floor, we still found nothing. All the way to the -10th floor. Finally, here, Xiao Feng saw someone. Someone. Xiao Feng looked happy and said there are more than 20 people, and I also saw D-class personnel. They seemed to be gathering around to discuss something, and some were on guard. Mo Qiang nodded and immediately asked, then have you seen a young man with dead fish eyes? Then Mo Qiang described David's appearance. Yes, there is the David you mentioned. Xiao Feng spoke, and at the same time, he frowned and said, they seem to be starting to take action. Then go down. Mo Qiang said, leading everyone directly into the elevator. He pressed the elevator on the 10th floor. Soon, the elevator went down. As soon as the elevator door opened, the field of vision became extremely bright. The corridor was filled with various crossroads. You can go left and right. Which way? Mo Qiang asked. Xiao Feng pointed straight ahead. Mo Qiang followed. At the same time, he threw a hair to determine David's direction. Mo Qiang stepped forward and opened the dreamland. Then, they saw a group of armed men. On both sides of a gate in the distance. David was among them. These people seemed to be waiting for something. The appearance of Mo Qiang and others instantly attracted their attention, and the muzzle of the gun was pointed directly at them. Xiao Feng's scalp was numb, and he hurriedly raised his hand. Raise your hands and shout D-80,083 report. The blonde and brown hair also hurriedly spoke, but they also raised the painting to indicate that they still wanted to look at the painting. It's the Lemeters, and D-class personnel, a member of the club said. Put your gun down and come over here with your hands raised, another club member said. Xiao Feng and others hurriedly put down their guns and obeyed. However, at this moment, Mo Qiang looked at the hair floating past and bypassed David in his field of vision. Mo Qiang's pupils shrank. That guy is not David. At this moment, Mo Qiang took out his gun and pulled the trigger. Da-da-da. The bullets were like a sloping flood, overwhelming and crushing everyone. T. Those people's heads exploded like watermelons. Even David was hit in the head by a bullet and fell to the ground with a thud. In just a few seconds, more than 20 people present were all dead. The brown-haired man stared with shock on his face. Are you crazy? No, wrong. But Xiao Feng reacted very quickly, picked up the gun, and said solemnly, no, he is right, these guys are fake. Real members of the society are not so easily fooled. Kill. The blonde and brown hair were stunned. Thinking about it, it seems that this is indeed the case. If real club members were easily killed, then the blue and white club wouldn't have anything to worry about. But they knew very well that the real members of the club, the elite among the elite, would never be killed by Mo Kyung. Get out of here. Mo Kyung said in a deep voice. He knew that there must be a containment object here, so he planned to leave without saying a word. He turned around and used the access card to go. However, this time, the access card failed. Oops, Xiao Feng's face turned pale. However, Mo Kyung thought for a while, took a step forward, and passed through the door to the other end. Well. Xiao Feng was stunned and hurried to follow. The two people behind him also followed suit. However, as soon as they came over, they took a breath. There was blood and minced meat everywhere, as well as the clothes of D-class personnel. Pieces of fungus grew out of the flesh and blood. The smell of blood and mold hit my face, making me want to gag. Looking back, what a good guy, where is the door behind them? Through the doorway, you can still see their previous passage. There were no bodies of commune members on the ground, only some bullet holes. Of course, there is also a huge mushroom, which is extremely weird. Similarly, there are some bullet holes on the huge mushroom. However, the bullets did not hit the mushroom. There were only some dents on the mushroom. Then, the dents gradually rebounded, and the bullets also fell on the ground, making a clanging sound. What the hell is this? Cold sweat broke out on Mo Kyung's forehead. They only had to get a little closer before they might have encountered the huge mushroom. There is no doubt that this must be a contained object. If they were touched by that thing, they would die without knowing how so. Now, Mo Kyung wants to know what kind of containment object this mushroom is. I do not know, however, Xiao Feng shook his head. Walk. Mo Kyung turned around and led everyone back to the elevator quickly. This big mushroom is obviously not something they can deal with. Firstly, I don't know what it is, and secondly, it's okay for a bullet to hit that mushroom. How else to fight? There is no way to fight. Therefore, retreat is the safest course of action. However, the elevator stopped at the -8 floor. After about 10 seconds, it did not go down, but continued upward. Someone is using the elevator. After this delay, when I turned back, I found that the smell of mold and blood had disappeared again, and there were no flesh and blood mushrooms on the ground. Everything looked clean and tidy. Damn it, here we go again. Xiao Feng's face turned ugly. Obviously, he also understood that everything he had experienced before was an illusion. That mushroom has the ability to induce hallucinations. Da. Mo Kyung started shooting without saying a word. Even though he knew the bullet was useless, he still shot. Anyway, it was a sure hit, and he had seen the mushroom again, so he just shot it and that was it. Although the bullet was useless, hitting the mushroom could temporarily dispel the illusion. Sure enough, the bullet hit the mushroom, and not long after, everything around him turned into a mess again, and the smell of blood hit his face again. But the mushroom was still squirming towards them, and was already less than 4 meters away. No matter what, go right. Mo Kyung made a quick decision and led everyone away from here. The mushroom can squirm and sneak. Once the mushroom occupies the crossroads, they will really have no way to escape. The 4 of them ran away quickly. Of course, Mo Kyung was not blind. He ran away, and he kept following Mao. During the run, Amo Kyan was still locating David's position. He led everyone around and around, approaching David step by step. After about 2 or 3 intersections, the hallucination finally disappeared. Mainly, they felt itching on their bodies. It was the mushroom spores that were floating everywhere. When they have hallucinations, they can't feel itching. Only when the hallucinations disappear will various senses appear. Damn it, you won't be infected with any effects again, right? Amo Kyan rubbed the spores on his body and was a little speechless. Fortunately, these spores and mildew spots can be rubbed off. It seems that the problem is not big. Anyway, it is enough to be fatal. Once you leave the range where the mushroom can create hallucinations, they finally had time to breathe a sigh of relief. Xiaofeng was also very happy. But he was still a little confused as to why Amo Kyan was so decisive before. Just shoot. That courage was simply amazing. Although it was fake, what if it was true? Isn't it the end of time? Naturally, Amo Kyan would not tell the truth, he just said a few perfunctory words. However, at this moment, the brown hare shouted, attracting everyone's attention. 382 turned around. What? Everyone's pupils shrank, and without saying a word, they turned to look at the painting. Sure enough, at this time, the back figure in the painting had turned a little. I was chased by mushrooms just now and made 2 coordination mistakes. The blonde's face also looked a little ugly. It must not come out, we can't make any more mistakes. Gotta find David quickly. Amo Kyan took a deep breath. Then he gave brown hare the eyes on the back of Xiaofeng's head, so that brown hare could hold them. In this way, he had 2 pairs of eyes looking at him. Then, he continued to lead the way to find David. Finally. And after turning another intersection, the 4 of them stopped again. What's wrong? The brown-haired man asked. The other 3 people were indeed looking ahead, with ugly expressions. But what they saw was a ruins in front of them, with broken walls, collapsed floors, and even a huge hole in the ceiling. Through the hole in the ceiling, you can also see the hole above. Looking down, you can see an alloy wall, like a big iron bucket, placed under the -10th floor. This is Doughty's holding room. Amo Kyan frowned and hurriedly took out the map he had drawn before and compared it. Sure enough, this is really the residence of Doughty. Such terrifying destructive power. At this moment, Amo Kyan, Xiaofeng, and the blonde hare all gasped. Cool air. Horrible, really scary. And Amo Kyan also noticed that the hare that he had previously located on David also flew upstairs along the hole. Well, David went upstairs? Amo Kyan wrinkled. He raised his eyebrows and thought about how to get up there. Da-da-da. However, at this moment, the faint sound of gunshots suddenly reached everyone's ears.